beneath the oceans, above the forests, hidden in valleys, and buried deep in stone, there may be stories we have never known. Civilizations that sang, built, remembered, and vanished without leaving monuments for us to find. Tonight, we ask a question that lingers softly yet shakes the imagination. How many civilizations have come and gone, unnoticed on Earth? Perhaps the traces are still out there, in whale songs carried across oceans, in beaver ponds shaped like quiet cities, in termite towers rising like forgotten cathedrals, or perhaps they are gone, erased by time, leaving only silence where memory once lived. If you are drawn to mysteries that stretch beyond history, if you long to see the world through a wider lens, then you are already part of this journey. Join us and let your curiosity grow with every story we uncover. Subscribe now to Beyond Our Dawn, where questions open doors to worlds we've only begun to imagine. The night settles slowly, folding over the land in quiet layers, and the air seems to carry a stillness meant for listening. Imagine yourself in a darkened room, the world outside hushed, while a voice begins to drift across your thoughts, inviting you toward a question that feels both simple and impossibly wide. Could the beginnings of civilization lie not only in our own hands, but in the lives of other animals who share this planet with us? Could their cultures, songs in the ocean, nests in the forest, dams across a stream, be the blueprints of something older, quieter, but no less remarkable than our own human story? It is a thought designed for nights like this, when imagination is free to wander without the weight of proof, and when curiosity can curl comfortably beside wonder. Civilization is a word we usually reserve for ourselves. It conjures the imagery of cities rising from stone, networks of roads weaving across continents, scripts carved into tablets or printed onto pages. But before we rush to hold that word too tightly, let us step back, step far enough that the distinctions between us and everything else blur just a little. Step into the forest, where the ground softens with moss and fallen leaves, where a bird collects fragments of colour, blueberries, shimmering beetle shells, strips of bark, and arranges them into a pattern that serves no obvious purpose except beauty. Step down into the dark water where whales pass songs from one generation to the next, notes that carry across entire ocean basins, stitched into the memory of a species. Step to the edge of a stream where beavers gnaw through saplings and reshape the current into a still pond, creating a new world for fish, birds, and insects. And then pause with termites, whose towers of mud and saliva rise like living cathedrals, regulating temperature and humidity with an engineering precision that no human blueprint could improve. In each of these lives is a suggestion that culture is not ours alone. Civilization, perhaps, is not an invention, but a possibility written into life itself. The thought lingers, whispering against assumptions. If culture is about knowledge passed on, teaching, learning, remembering, then perhaps the seeds of civilization were scattered long before we ever stood upright on two legs. If civilization is about shaping the environment in ways that last, beyond the individual, then surely a beaver's pond or a termite's mound qualify as monuments. And if civilization is about creating traditions that bind communities, then what are whale songs if not folk music echoing through the deep? A symphony no less ancient than our own chants and drums. These are questions that arrive softly, without demanding an answer, the kind of questions that rest inside the listener until they wake again on another night. Scientists often hesitate at words like civilization. They prefer precision, social learning, cumulative culture, niche construction, collective intelligence. They draw careful boundaries between instinct and culture, between environment and architecture, between signal and language. Yet in the quiet of the evening, when the ordinary urgency of the day has slipped away, it feels right to explore the blurred edges. The world is older than us by billions of years, and life has been experimenting in countless ways long before our species even existed. Is it really so strange to imagine that echoes of civilization might already be present in other forms, carried by wings, fins, or tiny legs? Picture yourself drifting in a canoe at dusk, the water calm, trees mirrored on its surface. In the distance, a splash breaks the silence. You realize that the pond beneath you is no natural lake at all, but the work of beavers, their dam holding back the stream, their lodges hidden under piles of branches. Generations of beavers have maintained this system, passing along knowledge of construction, renewing the dam each season, teaching their kits how to select wood and place it where the current is strongest. What you float upon is not merely water, but a legacy, a record of animal engineering etched into the landscape. To call it instinct is to flatten the complexity of learning, remembering, and adapting that sustains it. To call it civilization is to open the door to a larger, humbler view of what life is capable of. Or imagine standing on a rocky shore as the sun drops, and from far out at sea comes the low moan of a whale's call. The sound vibrates not only through water, but through the body, a resonance felt in the chest. That call may be part of a song that will travel thousands of miles, passed along from whale to whale, carried across years and continents. Recordings show that these songs shift, evolve, and spread like human folk tunes. Evidence of cultural drift in a species that has no written language, yet holds a memory that spans oceans. What do we call such persistence, if not tradition? What is tradition if not the foundation of culture? In a forest clearing, the light falls in mottled patterns across the ground. A bird hops carefully, carrying a bright object in its beak. It lays the fragment beside others, creating a display of color and symmetry. This is a bowerbird, and the structure it builds is not a nest for eggs, but a stage for attraction, a gallery designed to impress. Some bowers are decorated with hundreds of objects, arranged in gradients of color, showing a sensibility that resembles art. Observers note that young birds watch their elders, learn what materials to collect, and in turn innovate their own styles. What else is art if not tradition shaped by individual creativity? And what else is creativity if not a marker of culture's presence? Even the small and the many hold lessons. Termite mounds rise above savannas like weathered castles, some taller than a person. Inside, temperatures remain stable despite the heat outside, thanks to a ventilation system tuned through millions of years. These mounds are not mere shelters, but climate-controlled complexes, sustained by generations of builders who never see the whole structure, but contribute to its design through inherited behavior and learned cues. They alter soil composition, influence water retention, and change the ecosystem around them. Their architecture is not written in blueprints, but in collective action. Yet the outcome is unmistakably a monument. All of these images, the pond, the song, the gallery, the mound, stir a single thought. Perhaps civilization is not an invention, but a continuum. Perhaps it is not something we began, but something we joined, one expression in a long chain of life's experiments. We may be the first to carve skyscrapers or encode genomes, but we are not the first to reshape rivers, to compose art, or to sustain traditions across generations. Civilization might be a spectrum, and humanity one particularly visible point upon it. The idea is not without tension. If animals hold proto-civilizations, why do their works not accumulate into empires, cities, or histories? Why do we not find their monuments fossilized beside ours? The answer lies partly in time's erasure. Rivers wash away structures, forests consume them, sediments bury them, and only fragments remain. The Earth's library is incomplete, and most of its pages have been rewritten many times. Even our own monuments will vanish in the geological blink of a few million years. Yet while permanence is rare, meaning does not require eternity. A culture can exist fully in its own time, ephemeral, but no less real. As you listen tonight, consider the quiet drama of these lives. Imagine drifting in the company of whales, or kneeling beside a dam as water pools behind it, or leaning close to the decorated stage of a bowerbird. Each moment holds a suggestion that intelligence and creativity are not confined to us, and each suggestion holds a mirror up to our assumptions. Are we truly the only ones who shape worlds from memory and intention, or are we simply one version of a pattern that life has always explored? The question does not demand a conclusion. It only asks to be held, like a shell picked up on a beach, examined, and then set back down again. The voice that has accompanied you so far does not urge you to solve this mystery. Instead, it invites you to rest in it, to feel the calm of knowing that the world is wider than we imagine, richer in forms of culture than we often acknowledge. Tonight, as the air cools and silence grows deeper, let the thought linger. Civilization may be many things, but perhaps it is most simply the art of remembering together. If that is true, then the world around us is already full of civilizations, humming in forests, swimming in oceans, rising in mud towers, and waiting, patiently, for us to notice. And as this first chapter of our journey draws to a close, a soft question hovers, unfinished but enticing. If these hints of culture exist now, what greater legacies might be found when we listen more carefully to the voices of other species? That is where we will go next, into the songs, the stories, and the hidden architectures of life beyond our own. If we step back and imagine the Earth not as it is tonight, but as it has been for hundreds of millions of years, the landscape shifts and folds like a dream. Mountains rise and wear away, seas flood and recede, forests bloom and vanish, deserts spread and contract. Against this backdrop, civilizations, whether of insects or humans, appear like sparks, brief but luminous, illuminating their moment before being swallowed again by change. The fossil record is full of absences, gaps where we know life thrived, but left little trace. It is easy to imagine that entire cultures, entire proto-civilizations, once flourished and then vanished without leaving a mark strong enough for us to see. Time, relentless and patient, erases as much as it preserves. Even in our own history, the ruins of past civilizations remind us of this truth. Great cities that once rang with voices, laughter, and trade are now silent stones overgrown with vines, their roads broken, their temples crumbled. The Maya, the Sumerians, the Indus Valley dwellers, each built intricate societies that rose, flourished, and fell, leaving behind puzzles that archaeologists still struggle to piece together, and those are the ones fortunate enough to leave ruins. How many more vanished without trace, their traditions carried only in memory, their artifacts recycled by time, their names forgotten? If human civilizations can vanish so completely, what of the fragile traditions of whales, birds, or insects, whose records are even more ephemeral? The cycle of rise and fall is not merely tragedy, but rhythm, the heartbeat of life across deep time. Civilizations emerge where conditions allow: fertile soil, stable climate, abundant resources, and they decline when those conditions shift. For humans, droughts, wars, and disease have undone empires. For animals, a change in habitat, a predator, or a climate shift can erase traditions that persisted for millennia. It is not weakness, but inevitability, part of the larger law that nothing remains unchanged. Entropy whispers through every structure, reminding us that permanence is an illusion. What remains is not the monument, but the pattern, not the artifact, but the impulse to create again. And yet, even in this fragility, there is continuity. Civilizations may vanish, but the possibility of civilization endures. When one tradition ends, another begins elsewhere, carried by other lives, other communities. Whales may lose a song, but another will be sung. A bowerbird's display may rot away, but another will rise with the dawn. A colony may collapse, but another will tunnel into the earth and cultivate fungi anew. In this sense, civilization is not a singular achievement, but a recurring opportunity, reappearing again and again, wherever memory and cooperation align. It is a wheel turning through time, sometimes broken, sometimes renewed, but always returning in some form. For us, the fragility of civilizations raises questions not only about the past, but about the future. If even the mightiest human empires have crumbled, what of our own? Cities glitter tonight with light, networks pulse with information, satellites orbit above. But these too are vulnerable. They depend on resources, stability, cooperation, and balance with the world around them. Should those falter, our own traditions may become as faint as those of forgotten peoples, our monuments as weathered as termite mounds abandoned to the rain. To think of this is not despair, but humility, a reminder that we are participants in the same cycle that has governed all life since its beginning. There is a strange comfort in this perspective. To know that civilizations are temporary is to recognize that permanence is not the measure of value. A whale song that fades, a bower that decays, a dam that breaks, a mound that erodes. Each was real, each mattered in its time, each carried meaning for those who built it. The worth of a civilization lies not in how long it lasts, but in how fully it expresses the impulse to remember, to create, to cooperate. Even if forgotten, it was complete in its moment. Even if erased, it shaped the lives that lived within it. Civilization is not diminished by its fragility. It is defined by it. As the night deepens, the earth itself seems to breathe, shifting under our feet, whispering its long memory. The continents drift, the oceans circulate, the glaciers advance and retreat. In this vast theatre, civilizations are like candles lit against the dark, brief yet bright, illuminating not forever but enough. Each one adds a chapter to the unending book of life, a book that is constantly rewritten, its pages burned and restored, its words fading and reappearing. What matters is not the permanence of any single chapter, but the persistence of the book itself, the resilience of life's urge to build and remember. To drift into this thought is to feel less fear and more awe. We are not standing at the pinnacle of civilization, but walking along its wheel, one turn among many. Behind us, uncounted cultures, human and non-human, have risen and vanished. Ahead, others will emerge, carrying forward the same impulse in forms we cannot imagine. Some may be ours, some may belong to species yet to come, some may already exist in places we have not yet looked. Civilization is not a summit to be held, but a horizon to be glimpsed, receding even as we approach, inviting us to wonder not about finality, but about continuity. And so the night holds the lesson quietly. Civilizations are fragile, temporary, subject to disappearance. But in their fragility lies their beauty. They are acts of defiance against entropy, acts of memory against forgetting, acts of creation against silence. The whale sings, the bird builds, the beaver engineers, the insect cultivates, the primate teaches, and we too write, construct, and dream. Each act is fleeting, but together they form a chorus that has never stopped, a chorus that continues even as individual voices fall silent. Civilization is not permanence. It is participation in this ongoing song. As you let these images settle, the rhythm of the cycle itself becomes soothing. Rise and fall, emergence and disappearance, continuity and loss. It is all part of the same pattern, the same lullaby sung by the earth across ages. Perhaps this is the true meaning of civilization. Not the monuments we leave, but the willingness to join in the chorus, to contribute a verse, however brief, to the long memory of life. And when the chorus moves on without us, as it always does, it will not be silence but renewal, the beginning of another voice, another tradition, another civilization waiting quietly to take its turn. The wheel of civilizations turns, and with it comes the silence after their passing. Termite mounds crumble, dams break, bowers fade, songs drift into quiet seas. Yet the impulse that gave rise to them lingers, waiting for the next chance, the next gathering, the next tradition. To reflect on this, is to feel the paradox of civilization itself, always fragile, always impermanent, yet somehow always returning. It is not a ladder leading upward, but a rhythm pulsing through time, repeating across species, landscapes, and epochs. And within this rhythm lies a mirror, one that reflects not only the lives of whales, birds, primates, beavers, and insects, but our own, inviting us to see ourselves differently. When we think of human civilization, it is tempting to see permanence, the walls of our cities, the networks of our technology, the archives of our knowledge. These feel immovable, enduring, almost eternal. But history teaches otherwise. Empires rose and fell, their monuments swallowed by sand, their languages lost, their wisdom fractured into fragments rediscovered centuries later. We are not immune to the rhythm, we are woven into it. Our towers may gleam now, our networks hum with information, but they too depend on balance. Balance with the earth, balance with each other, balance with the fragile systems that sustain us. Without that balance, continuity falters, and the silence returns. We are in truth closer to the beaver repairing its dam, to the termite patching its mound, to the bowerbird rearranging petals than we often admit. Maintenance, not permanence, is the true foundation of civilization. To see this clearly is to let humility settle. It is to recognize that our achievements, vast though they may seem, are not singular, but part of a broader pattern shared by life itself. The whale sings across oceans, we broadcast across the airwaves. The beaver sculpts rivers, we sculpt skylines. The insect cultivates fungi, we cultivate fields. The parallels are not accidents, but echoes of a deeper principle. Wherever memory meets cooperation, civilization stirs. We are not exceptions to this principle, only one of its expressions. To know this is to feel less isolated, less exalted, more connected to the chorus of life. There is also awe in realizing how much of this chorus may already have been lost. The fossil record, rich as it is, holds more gaps than pages. Whole worlds have vanished without leaving us their story. Forests that stood for millions of years left no trace but scattered impressions in stone. Species that sang, built, hunted, or cultivated disappeared without memory, their traditions erased. Perhaps civilizations rose among them, proto-civilizations of astonishing beauty, now forgotten. We cannot know. And yet, even in the absence of proof, the possibility itself expands the imagination. It reminds us that our present moment is not the whole story, but a chapter, and that the earth has been home to countless stories before ours. This awareness changes how the night feels. What was once silence becomes resonance, filled with the echoes of civilizations past and present. The ground beneath us is not empty, but layered with memory, each stratum holding fragments of lives that built, endured, and vanished. The air around us carries songs we cannot hear, patterns of flight and ritual invisible to our eyes. The rivers, the forests, the fields, all hold traditions unfolding quietly, unnoticed by most but real nonetheless. Civilization is everywhere, if we learn to look with softer eyes. And when we look with those eyes, the boundaries begin to blur. The term civilization, once reserved for human empires and cities, begins to stretch. It includes the whale's song passed from pod to pod, the beaver's dam inherited across generations, the bird's bower refined into artistry, the primate's foraging techniques preserved in memory, the insect's garden cultivated for millions of years. Civilization becomes less about scale and more about continuity, less about monuments and more about traditions. It becomes not a crown, but a current, flowing through life in many forms, each unique, each fleeting, each part of a larger whole. What does this mean for us, here and now, lying awake in the quiet? It means that to see civilization clearly is to see it as fragile, shared, and dependent. It means that our own survival is tied to the survival of countless other cultures, human and non-human alike. The destruction of a forest erases not only trees but the traditions of the primates who live there, the songs of the birds who nest there, the architecture of the insects who tunnel there. The warming of oceans silences whale songs and disrupts their transmission. The damming of rivers destroys beaver traditions that have endured for millennia. Every loss is a cultural loss, every extinction an erasure not only of biology, but of civilization. To realize this is to expand the weight of our responsibility. We are not only guardians of our own culture, but participants in a world of cultures, interwoven, fragile, and beautiful. The mirror, then, is double-sided. On one side, it reflects our kinship with the civilizations of other species. On the other, it reflects our own vulnerability, our dependence on balance. To see both is to be humbled and inspired, to recognize that we are part of something larger than ourselves. It invites us to act with care, not only for our sake, but for the sake of the chorus that sustains us. Civilization is not a fortress to defend, but a song to nurture, one that grows richer when more voices are allowed to join. As night deepens, this thought unfolds like a lullaby. The wheel of civilizations turns, and we turn with it, one expression among many. The whale sings, the bird arranges, the beaver builds, the insect cultivates, the primate teaches, and we too create, remember, and pass on. Each act is fragile, each tradition vulnerable, but together they weave the fabric of life's memory. And when silence comes, as it always does, it is not the end but a pause before the next verse, the next tradition, the next civilization, waiting, quietly in the wings of time. And so the night carries us gently toward the threshold of deeper reflection. For if civilizations rise and vanish, if memory is preserved and erased, then what traces remain? What signs might endure through the turning of continents, the grinding of glaciers, the shifting of seas? The earth itself becomes the archive, sediment the pages, stone the script. In those pages we may yet glimpse the faint shadows of civilizations, long gone traces etched into geology, waiting for us to learn how to read them. That question, patient and haunting, leads us toward the next horizon, where the earth itself speaks of memory older than our own. The earth itself becomes the final witness, the keeper of what civilizations cannot hold. Where memory fades, where songs fall silent, where nests rot, where dams collapse, the ground remains, turning the remnants of life into sediment and stone. If civilizations are sparks, the earth is the dark canvas against which they glow, sometimes catching their light, sometimes letting it vanish without a trace. To press a hand against the soil is to touch an archive, though most of its pages are sealed, written in codes of minerals, fossils, isotopes, and layers that shift under pressure. Reading it requires patience, humility, and imagination. And, even then, most of what was will remain invisible, erased by the ceaseless churn of time. Consider sediment, that quiet storyteller formed by rivers, winds, and tides. Every grain is a fragment of something older. A mountain weathered, a shell broken, a leaf reduced to dust. Layer upon layer, these fragments accumulate, recording not just the passage of time, but the presence of life. Within them are pollen, grains that speak of vanished forests, microscopic shells that reveal oceans long gone, chemical signatures that record the breath of volcanoes and the rise of oxygen. In this way, the Earth keeps partial minutes of its own history. It is not a careful scribe, but a distracted one, writing some details while erasing others, preserving accidents while losing essentials. Yet what survives can be astonishing. A thin layer of iridium tells of an asteroid impact that ended the age of dinosaurs. A shift in carbon isotopes whispers of ancient climate changes. A bed of fossils captures a sudden death of fish and plants. In a vanished lake, these are traces of events, but also traces of civilizations, if we allow the definition to widen beyond our own. For if whales once built traditions in seas that no longer exist, if birds once displayed art in forests since turned to stone, if insects once cultivated gardens in climates erased by shifting continents, might their traces not lie buried here too? Not statues or tools as we know them, but subtler anomalies. Unusual concentrations of minerals, patterns of sediment disrupted by deliberate arrangement, chemical residues that do not fit the natural rhythm. Geologists search for such signals, careful to distinguish the deliberate from the accidental, the cultural from the purely geological. Most anomalies prove to be natural, yet the possibility remains that somewhere, hidden deep, lies the fingerprint of a civilization we have never known. To imagine this is to feel the Earth as a cryptic library, its shelves vast, its catalogues incomplete, its volumes half-burned yet still whispering. Even our own time will leave such traces, though not in the ways we expect. Buildings crumble, metals corrode, roads erode, but certain signatures endure. Plastics, resistant to decay, will persist in sediments for tens of thousands of years, microscopic fragments embedded in rocks and clays. Radioactive isotopes from nuclear tests will mark the mid-20th century as a distinct line, a global signal, detectable even if all else fades. Carbon spikes from fossil fuel combustion, nitrogen residues from fertilizers, novel compounds never seen in nature, these will remain as chemical scars in the strata, evidence of a civilization that altered the atmosphere, the soil, and the oceans in ways no natural process could mimic. If some future intelligence were to dig through the layers, they would find our trace not in monuments, but in chemistry, not in statues, but in isotopes. Our legacy, like that of countless forgotten cultures, will be less visible than we imagine, but no less real. The humility deepens when we recall how much the Earth erases. Mountains rise and wear away, oceans spread and close, glaciers scour the surface clean. Whole continents have vanished beneath waves, their rocks recycled into new crust. If civilizations arose before us, their traces may have been subducted, melted, and reborn as new stone. The fossil record is sparse not because life was absent, but because preservation is rare. Most creatures vanish without leaving a mark. Most behaviors leave no fossil at all. Songs do not fossilize, nor do traditions, nor do cultures of sound, color, or memory. What endures is fragmentary, partial, smudged like a manuscript that has been erased and overwritten many times. To search for ancient civilizations in this record is to read through static, to glimpse words that may not belong to the story we hope to find. And yet, to imagine that nothing remains is too simple. There are places on Earth where time moves more slowly, where sediments accumulate undisturbed for millions of years, where climates have remained stable long enough to preserve delicate signals. In Greenland's ice, bubbles of air trap the breath of ancient atmospheres. In deep-sea cores, layers of sediment mark each season's plankton bloom, each change in temperature. In caves, stalagmites record the drip of water across centuries, embedding chemical fingerprints of rainfall and vegetation. These are archives of astonishing fidelity. If any civilization left traces that reached beyond biology, mining, metallurgy, energy, agriculture, perhaps some subtle residue might survive in such stable places. The challenge is not only to find it, but to recognize it, to distinguish it from the background noise of natural processes. Civilization, if it existed long before us, may already be catalogued as anomaly without explanation, filed under mystery in the geological record. As the thought unfolds, night settles deeper. The ground beneath your resting body feels less like inert matter and more like an immense chronicle, layered, incomplete, yet alive with meaning. You imagine peeling back the earth like pages of a book, each layer revealing not only fossils and minerals, but echoes of civilizations, some known, some forgotten, some never guessed. A forest that once grew where desert now stretches. A city of beavers long gone, their dams fossilized in sediment. A tradition of birds whose bowers are now impressions in stone. an insect colony that farmed fungi in climates erased by shifting monsoons. Each page fragile, most lost, but some still faintly legible, waiting for the right eyes to read. The question lingers softly. If civilizations can be erased so thoroughly, what does it mean that some traces remain? Perhaps it means that no civilization, however fragile, is truly lost. Even if memory fades, even if ruins crumble, even if songs are silenced, the earth itself carries the echo. It may not be clear, it may not be complete, but it is there, woven into the soil and stone. To imagine this is to feel continuity, not only through living tradition, but through the archive of the planet itself. Civilization becomes not only a song sung together, but a layer written into the crust, a faint but enduring note in the symphony of geology. Beneath the surface, the earth is restless, shifting and remaking itself. Even as it preserves, it destroys. A layer of volcanic ash may entomb a forest, preserving its shapes for millions of years. But elsewhere, a river may scour a valley clean, leaving no trace of what once thrived. In this tension between preservation and erasure lies the mystery of all civilizations. We know some traces survive, but most do not. We inherit fragments, half-phrases, scattered chapters. The rest is silence. And so, the imagination wanders into those silences, filling them with possibilities, with the idea that countless cultures may have risen and fallen unnoticed, their presence lost to the churn of stone. What would it mean to stumble upon a true trace of an ancient, non-human civilization? Not a fossil of a body, but a fossil of a behavior, a pattern so unlikely that only culture could explain it. Perhaps it would be a cluster of minerals arranged in unnatural symmetry, evidence of extraction or refinement. Perhaps it would be sediment laced with chemical residues foreign to natural cycles, like the faint signal of metallurgy or energy use. Perhaps it would be a disruption in fossil distributions, sudden shifts in vegetation not accounted for by climate alone. Any one of these could whisper of civilization, though without certainty, for the earth is filled with false signals, coincidences born of pressure and heat. To interpret them is to read a language written in riddles, to balance skepticism with openness. In our own age, scientists search for such signals, not only in the past, but in the present, asking what traces we ourselves will leave. This has led to the concept of the Anthropocene, a proposed epoch marked by human influence on geology. Plastics in sediments, concrete fused into stone, aluminum particles carried by wind, carbon isotopes altered by fossil fuels. All of these will endure far longer than our buildings or our words. They are chemical signatures that cannot be erased easily. Messages not intended as messages but written nonetheless into the strata. If our civilization ended tomorrow, future geologists might detect these markers millions of years hence, long after our monuments crumbled. They would know that something unusual had occurred, something beyond the slow rhythms of natural cycles. Our legacy, for better or worse, will be etched in the earth, a faint but undeniable scar. And so, when we look for traces of civilizations before us, we search for the same kinds of signals, not monuments, but anomalies, not scripts, but signatures. The work is difficult, for nature produces anomalies of its own, and the line between deliberate and accidental blurs. A concentration of metals could signal mining, or a volcanic eruption. A shift in isotopes could signal agriculture, or a change in currents. The challenge is not only finding traces, but recognizing them, interpreting them with care. In this, geology resembles archaeology of the deepest kind, one where the artifacts are not potsherds or walls, but chemical whispers, preserved across millions of years. The thought that civilizations may have risen and vanished unrecognized is both unsettling and strangely comforting. It suggests we are not alone in the long history of intelligence, that others may have walked this path before us, leaving faint echoes in the strata. At the same time, it underscores the brevity of our own moment, the likelihood that we too will fade, leaving only anomalies to hint at our existence. To see this clearly, is to accept both our significance and our smallness. We are part of a continuum, not the culmination of it. The Earth has carried civilizations before and will carry others after, each a verse in the larger song of time. In quiet moments, it helps to imagine the Earth itself as a kind of palimpsest, a manuscript, written and rewritten countless times. Pages are torn out, others are overwritten, some are smudged beyond recognition. But every so often, a fragment remains legible, a word or phrase shining through. These fragments are the fossils, the isotopes, the anomalies. They are not the whole story, but they remind us that stories were there. And in the gaps, we are free to imagine, to wonder about what civilizations might have been, what songs were sung, what traditions remembered, what monuments raised and lost. The act of imagining is itself part of the record, a way of giving voice to the silence, a way of honoring what cannot be recovered. As night thickens, the ground beneath us feels less solid, more like an ocean of time, waves of stone carrying memory and erasure together. We lie atop continents that were once seabeds, seas that were once mountains, forests that turned to coal, deserts that turned to grasslands. Civilization, in this context, becomes not a fixed achievement, but a fleeting arrangement, like patterns, in sand that shift with each tide. And yet those patterns, however brief, leave their mark. Even if the mark is faint, even if it is erased, for a moment it was real, and that reality is enough. The Earth, then, is both archive and eraser, both library and furnace. It keeps some traces and obliterates others. We cannot know which of our own works will survive, nor which of other civilizations' works have already been lost. But we can know that the impulse to create, to cooperate, to remember, will always find a way to leave something behind, however subtle. Civilization, in this light, is less about what is preserved and more about the act of leaving traces at all. The traces themselves may vanish, but the act echoes across time, carried forward in the rhythm of life's persistence. And as you let these thoughts drift into the quiet of the night, you may feel less like an observer and more like a participant in this grand ongoing story. Beneath you, the Earth holds memory deeper than any library. Around you, the air carries signals from civilizations still alive in birds, beavers, whales, insects, primates, and humans. Ahead of you lies the inevitability of change, the certainty of silence, and beyond that, renewal. Civilization is not forever, but it is real, and the Earth will carry its traces in ways we cannot yet imagine. That knowledge is enough to soften the fear of disappearance and replace it with awe. For in the end, every civilization is a note in the symphony of the planet, brief but resonant, fading but never meaningless, written into the stone that waits patiently beneath our feet. The Earth keeps some memory, but more often it forgets. That is the paradox of evidence. It is fragile, fleeting, and partial. When we hold a fossil in our hand, it feels solid, a piece of stone that has survived millions of years. But what we forget is how improbable its survival really is, how rare the conditions that allow bone or shell to transform into rock. For every fossil that endures, millions of lives have vanished without leaving a trace. Soft bodies dissolve, wooden structures rot, pigments fade, songs disappear the moment they fall silent. The archive of the Earth is immense, but it is also full of missing pages, entire volumes unwritten or erased. To imagine civilizations within this archive is to imagine not only what might be preserved, but what has certainly been lost. Even in the human record, where our structures are vast and our archives deliberate, fragility dominates. Libraries burn, inscriptions weather, data corrupts. The ruins we prize are only fragments, sometimes so incomplete that we misinterpret them entirely. A broken shard of pottery becomes a theory about trade. A collapsed wall becomes a story of conquest. Later evidence may overturn these narratives, reminding us how tenuous our reconstructions really are. If our own civilizations, built in stone and steel, leave such uncertain legacies, how much harder to detect those of other species, whose traditions were woven from sound, gesture, or materials too delicate to endure. Evidence is fragile not only in preservation, but in recognition. A pattern in the earth may be dismissed as natural when in fact it was cultural. A concentration of minerals may be catalogued as anomaly without realizing it was deliberate. A fossil may reveal anatomy but hide behavior. What we fail to recognize becomes as good as lost, buried not by time, but by our own limitations. Perhaps we have already walked past traces of ancient civilizations without knowing it. The signs overlooked because they did not fit our expectations. We search for statues and metals. But what if another culture left only songs, or gardens, or arrangements of shells? We might never know, because evidence is fragile not only in its survival, but in its translation. Consider language, one of the most powerful markers of civilization, yet also the most fragile. Spoken words vanish as soon as they are uttered. Without writing, without recordings, language is as fleeting as breath. Entire tongues have disappeared within a generation, leaving behind only silence. We know they existed because we have records, but what of those languages that disappeared before writing? Their rhythms, their metaphors, their ways of seeing the world, gone entirely, irretrievable. If language is fragile even among humans, how much more so among other species? Wail, songs, bird calls, primate gestures, insect signals, all forms of communication that may carry culture but leave no enduring record. To imagine civilizations built on such languages is to accept that most of them would vanish without trace, their evidence carried only in living memory that dies with the last speaker. Even material evidence can mislead. A bowerbird structure, if fossilized, might look like random sticks. A beaver's dam, if eroded, might resemble natural sediment. A termite mound, if collapsed, might seem like an ordinary hill. Without the living behavior to reveal intention, the traces lose their meaning. This is the fragility of evidence. It depends on context, and context is easily erased. Civilization without context looks like accident. Tradition without witnesses looks like randomness. Only by rare coincidence do traces survive in ways that reveal their true nature. Otherwise, the past becomes an unsolved puzzle, with more missing pieces than present ones. And yet fragility is not futility. Even the faintest evidence can whisper across time. A fossil pollen grain can reveal an ancient forest. A subtle chemical anomaly can reveal human industry. A shallow engraving can carry a message thousands of years beyond its maker. Fragility makes evidence precious, not meaningless. It forces us to approach the past with humility, to recognize that what we hold is not the whole story, but a fragment, a glimpse, a shard of a larger truth. It invites us to imagine, to wonder, to fill the silence with questions rather than certainty. The fragility of evidence is not a failure, but a reminder that the world is larger than what survives, that civilization is more than what can be measured. At night, when the world quiets, the mind turns easily toward these silences. Lying beneath stars, one feels how small even our largest monuments are, how temporary even our most durable archives. Stone erodes, metal corrodes, memory fades. But in that recognition comes a gentleness, a sense that perhaps permanence is not the measure of value. A song sung and lost is still a song. A tradition practiced and forgotten is still real. A civilization erased is still a civilization, complete in its moment, even if invisible to us now. Evidence is fragile, but existence is not dependent on our ability to record it. The world has been filled with lives, cultures, and civilizations that mattered in their time, whether or not they left a trace for us. This realization softens the urgency to find definitive proof. It suggests that the search itself is as meaningful as the discovery. To look for traces is to honor the possibility of others, to admit that intelligence and culture may not be unique, to widen our imagination of what civilization can mean. Fragility ensures that most of what was will remain hidden, but it also ensures that what we do find is precious, a rare thread in a vast tapestry otherwise invisible. To hold such a thread is to feel connection across time, a reminder that life has always been weaving, always been remembering, always been building and passing on. The fragility of evidence also casts our own moment in a new light. We imagine our civilization as permanent because we document it so thoroughly. But how much will survive the grinding of glaciers, the rising of seas, the shifting of continents? Perhaps a thin layer of plastic, a scattering of isotopes, a brief anomaly in the chemical record. The rest will vanish, erased as surely as the bowers, the songs, the traditions of countless species before us. To know this is to feel humility, but also clarity. Our monuments are not forever. Our archives are not eternal. What endures is the act of creating, the continuity of memory, the rhythm of civilization itself, fragile yet recurring. Evidence may fail, but the impulse returns. As you drift into sleep, the thought settles like dust on water. Evidence is fragile, yes, but its fragility is part of its beauty. Each fragment is a miracle, each trace a whisper across ages. To find one is to bridge silence, to touch a moment otherwise gone. To imagine those we cannot find is to honor them too, acknowledging that civilization has always been larger than what survives. In this way, fragility does not diminish the story, it deepens it, surrounding each trace with the vast mystery of what has been lost. And in that mystery lies a peace, a gentle acceptance that the world is fuller than we can ever know, and that to exist, even briefly, is to leave a mark, however faint, on the endless archive of the earth. The night has carried us far, through oceans and forests, through rivers and grasslands, into the hidden chambers of Earth itself. We have seen whales pass songs across seas, birds decorate their bowers with colour, beavers sculpt landscapes with water, insects cultivate ancient gardens, primates inherit foraging techniques, and humans, ourselves, record and dream. Threaded through each of these stories lies the same quiet question. What separates instinct from culture, reflex from tradition, accident from civilization? The answer is elusive, fragile, shifting like light on water. It is here, at the boundary, between instinct and culture, that science has wrestled most fiercely, cautious in its claims yet unable to ignore the wonder. Instinct, in the simplest sense, is behavior encoded in genes, arising without teaching or imitation. A spider spins its web, a bird migrates by starlight, a newborn mammal seeks its mother's milk. These acts are not learned, they unfold automatically, ancient scripts written by evolution. Culture, by contrast, is knowledge carried socially, learned by observation, passed through memory, adapted by innovation. Culture is the song learned from elders, the tool copied from a parent, the gesture refined across generations. Instinct is inherited through biology. Culture is inherited through community. Yet when we look closely, the line between them is not always so clear. Behaviors overlap, intertwine, evolve from one into the other. And it is in this ambiguity that debate arises. Consider the case of crows, among the most studied of birds for their intelligence and traditions. In New Caledonia, crows fashion tools from twigs and leaves, shaping hooks to extract insects from bark. These tools are not uniform. They vary by region, style, and refinement. Young crows learn by watching adults, fumbling awkwardly at first, improving with practice, eventually mastering the craft. Studies show that techniques spread socially, that regional dialects of tool-making exist, and yet the debate persists. Is this instinct encoded in their genes, or culture carried by learning? Some researchers argue that tool use is so widespread in these crows that it must be innate. Others that its variability proves it is cultural. The truth may be both. A predisposition to manipulate twigs, sharpened into culture by memory and imitation. Instinct provides the seed, culture grows the tree. Whales complicate the boundary further. Humpback whales sing songs that can last for hours, intricate sequences of notes repeated and varied. These songs are not static, they change over time, new patterns spreading across oceans as whales imitate one another. Researchers have tracked these cultural waves as they ripple eastward, one population learning from another, until an entire ocean basin shares a new song. This is not instinct alone, for instinct does not explain the geographic spread, the imitation, the gradual evolution of form. And yet, whales are born with the capacity for sound, with vocal anatomy tuned for song, with predispositions that guide their expression. Again, the line blurs. Instinct provides the instrument. Culture plays the music. Primates bring the debate even closer. Chimpanzees in one forest crack nuts with stones. In another, they do not. Orangutans in one valley use leaves as umbrellas. In another, they never learn. Japanese macaques on one island wash sweet potatoes in streams, a tradition begun by a single individual and carried on by her descendants. These differences are not genetic, they are cultural. They are learned, transmitted, remembered. Yet even here, the shadow of instinct hovers. Chimps are predisposed to curiosity, to dexterous manipulation, to problem solving. The seeds of tool use lie in their biology, but the flowering into tradition requires culture. The line, once again, is less a boundary than a gradient. This ambiguity has fueled scientific debate for decades. Some insist on strict definitions. Culture must be symbolic, cumulative, innovative, beyond survival. By such definitions, only humans qualify. Others argue for a broader view. Culture is any socially learned tradition that persists beyond individuals. By this measure, many species qualify, from birds to whales, to primates to insects. The disagreement reflects not only evidence, but perspective. To narrow the definition preserves human uniqueness. To broaden it recognizes kinship. Science treads carefully, weighing evidence, wary of projecting our own patterns onto others, yet also open to the possibility that culture is not ours alone. And so the debate circles back to us, not only as scientists, but as listeners. What do we require for something to count as culture? Must it be written? Must it be monumental? Must it leave durable traces? Or is it enough that a crow shapes a tool, that a whale sings a song, that a primate teaches a child, that a beaver repairs a dam? If civilization begins with continuity of knowledge, then perhaps culture need not be monumental at all. Perhaps it need only be remembered together, however briefly, however fragilely. The line between instinct and culture then becomes less a wall and more a threshold, one that many species cross, even if only for a moment. The thought is both humbling and exhilarating. Humbling because it reveals that our uniqueness is less absolute than we once believed. Exhilarating because it suggests we live among civilizations in miniature, cultures in the making, proto-civilizations scattered across earth and sea. They may not last, they may not leave ruins, but they exist in their moments, as real as ours. A whale's song passed across an ocean is as much a tradition as a human ballad. A crow's tool passed across generations is as much an invention as a human spear. The line is blurred not because the evidence is weak, but because life itself refuses to be confined by categories. As night stretches on, the question deepens into something more than science. If animals cross the threshold into culture, even for a heartbeat of time, are we not glimpsing the seeds of civilization itself? If whales compose evolving songs, if crows craft tools with regional variation, if primates inherit traditions of foraging and play, then civilization is not a human monopoly but a shared possibility. It may be fragile, ephemeral, unrecorded, but it is there, a shimmer at the edge of perception. To recognize it is to widen our understanding of what it means to be civilized, to expand the circle of kinship, to honor the diversity of memory in the living world. The fragility of evidence ensures that most of these civilizations will vanish without trace, as countless already have. But fragility does not diminish their reality. A culture need not endure forever to be real. A civilization need not build cities to exist. It need only persist beyond one generation, carried by memory, learned by imitation, reshaped by innovation. By this measure, the Earth has always been alive with civilizations, rising and falling in forms we are only beginning to glimpse. And so the night ends not with certainty, but with wonder. The debate remains unresolved, the boundary blurred, the evidence fragile. Yet within that ambiguity lies possibility. The next time you hear a bird call with subtle variations, or see a crow bending a twig, or imagine whales singing beneath the waves, you may sense not just instinct but culture, not just reflex but tradition. And if so, you may feel a quiet thrill, the realization that perhaps you are hearing, in that moment, the faint beginnings of civilization. The question lingers, soft but insistent. If animals cross that boundary, even for a fleeting instant, are we not already in the presence of something greater, something that mirrors our own beginnings, something that reminds us we are not alone in building worlds of memory and meaning? The night grows very still now, as if the earth itself is pausing to listen. After tracing civilizations across oceans, forests, rivers, soil, and sky, after wondering at songs, bowers, dams, and mounds, after weighing evidence fragile and rare, another question surfaces, one that no fossil can answer, no sediment can preserve, no experiment can resolve. If animals carry within them the seeds of culture, if they remember, build, and pass on their traditions, then what responsibility do we, as humans, hold in response? What does it mean to live among proto-civilizations, to recognize in them not only survival but memory, not only instinct but culture? This question does not call for urgency or alarm, but for gentleness, for reflection, for a widening of empathy. It is a question about coexistence, about how we choose to live in a world that is more alive with meaning than we once believed. To begin, we must consider conservation not only as the preservation of species, but as the preservation of cultures. When we protect whales from hunting, we are not only saving bodies but songs. When we protect forests, we are not only preserving trees, but the bowers birds build, the traditions primates pass down, the lodges beavers repair. Every extinction is more than biological loss. It is cultural loss, the erasure of a memory line that may have endured for generations. If humpback whales carry songs across oceans, then the death of even a single population silences an entire dialect, a tradition that will never be sung again. If chimpanzees teach tool use to their young, then the destruction of their habitat erases techniques that will vanish forever. Conservation, seen through this lens, becomes not only science, but ethics, not only biology, but respect for civilizations that exist alongside our own. This reframing softens the boundary between us and them. It asks us to see animals not merely as resources or curiosities, but as participants in the same great experiment of civilization. They may not build monuments, but they build traditions. They may not write books, but they remember. They may not govern with laws, but they live within social contracts. To recognize this is to feel humility, to realize that our civilizations are not isolated, but part of a continuum. And once we see this continuum, responsibility follows. If we are the species with the greatest power, then we are also the species with the greatest duty to safeguard the voices of others. The thought can feel heavy, but it need not be frightening. Responsibility, in this sense, is not burden, but invitation. It is an invitation to live with deeper attention, to walk more gently, to listen more carefully. It is to imagine that when a forest is felled, it is not only timber that is lost, but also the memory of birds that sang there, the foraging traditions of primates, the shelters of insects, the artistry of creatures whose civilizations may last only a few generations but are civilizations nonetheless. To conserve is to preserve these stories, to allow them to continue, to ensure that the wheel of culture turns not only for us, but for all. Coexistence is another part of this responsibility. Too often we imagine living side by side with animals as a matter of tolerance, of leaving them undisturbed at the edges of our lives. But what if it is more than that? What if coexistence is not absence but presence, not indifference but recognition? It is to acknowledge that when a whale sings, it is speaking not only to its own kind, but also to the ocean itself. And by hearing it, we become part of its audience. It is to accept that when a crow bends a twig, we are witnesses to a tradition as meaningful as any human craft. Coexistence means living not above or apart, but among, sharing the world with civilizations that are fragile, but real, different, but familiar. Philosophy has always wrestled with the question of moral regard. Who deserves empathy? Who deserves respect? For centuries, the answer was limited to humans alone. Then it widened to include some animals, then ecosystems, then the earth itself. Each expansion has been an act of humility, a recognition that we are not the sole bearers of meaning. To see proto-civilizations in other species is to take the next step, to widen the circle again. It is to admit that culture, memory, and civilization are not uniquely ours, but shared, and that to ignore them is to impoverish not only the animals, but ourselves. Philosophy meets science here, not in abstraction, but in compassion, asking us to act not out of dominance, but out of kinship. Some may resist this view, fearing it diminishes humanity, blurs our uniqueness. But perhaps uniqueness need not mean exclusion. Perhaps it means responsibility. Our power to alter landscapes, to erase traditions, to silence voices is unparalleled. But so too is our power to protect, to preserve, to listen. Uniqueness, then, becomes not a crown but a calling, not a privilege but a responsibility. If we are capable of understanding the fragility of evidence, the resilience of culture, the possibility of civilization across species, then we are capable of choosing how to respond. The choice is ours, to ignore or to honor, to exploit or to protect, to dominate or to coexist. In the quiet of the night, when the mind drifts more easily into empathy, it helps to imagine the world not as resource, but as conversation. Each species speaks in its own language, song, gesture, architecture, memory, and together they form a chorus. To recognize this chorus is to feel awe, but also to feel responsibility. For some voices are faint, some easily silenced, some already gone. If we listen carefully, we may help them endure. If we act with care, we may ensure the song continues. Coexistence, then, is not passive but active, not tolerance but attention, not avoidance but embrace. It is to live as participants in a world of civilizations, large and small, ancient and fragile, all of them worthy of respect. And here, philosophy offers its gentlest lesson, that empathy is not a finite resource, not something we lose by giving away. The more we extend it, the more it grows. To respect the proto-civilizations of animals does not weaken our own, it strengthens them, reminding us that civilization itself is a shared inheritance of life. To live ethically among them is to live more fully ourselves, to inhabit a world richer, deeper, more connected. It is to trade isolation for kinship, arrogance for humility, exploitation for care. It is, in the end, to be more human, not less. As the night prepares to close, one final question lingers, soft and unresolved. If animals carry the beginnings of civilization, and we have the power to nurture or erase them, what legacy will we choose to leave? Will we be remembered as destroyers of traditions or as guardians of them? Will the strata of the future hold only our own scars? Or will they also carry the echoes of songs, bowers, dams, mounds, and memories we allowed to endure? The answer is not yet written. It rests with us, here, in this moment, in the quiet choices of empathy and respect. And as the question lingers, it does not demand urgency but invites reflection, guiding us gently toward a deeper sense of kinship, a deeper sense of responsibility, a deeper sense of what it means to live among civilizations not our own. The journey has carried us across oceans and forests, beneath rivers, and into the hidden chambers of the earth, through song and memory, through evidence fragile and faint. And now, as the circle nears its close, we return to the widest horizon of all, the recognition that evolution, and with it civilization, is not a straight path upward, but a branching tree, a wheel turning endlessly, a cycle of emergence and disappearance. To imagine culture as linear is to imagine history as a ladder, each rung leading higher, each step building inevitably toward us. But the truth written in fossils, in sediments, in the very logic of life, is more complex. Evolution does not climb, it spreads. It does not march, it drifts and forks and doubles back. Civilizations, if they exist beyond us, follow the same rhythm. They rise and fade, they appear and vanish, they leave traces faint or none at all, yet always the impulse returns. In the fossil record, this branching is everywhere. Ancient seas once held creatures with armor of stone, now vanished. Forests once echoed with insects as large as hawks, dragonflies with wingspans wider than a human arm. Dinosaurs flourished in endless forms, from towering herbivores to nimble predators, from giants that thundered across plains to delicate species no larger than a sparrow. For more than 100 million years, they were the world's dominant life. Within their vast diversity, intelligence flickered here and there, perhaps never enough to flower fully into civilization, perhaps briefly in ways now erased. Then, suddenly they were gone, undone by a cosmic accident, leaving only birds to carry their legacy. This is the pattern, branching, thriving, collapsing, renewing. It is not progress but cycle, not ladder but wheel. The same is true of culture. Human history shows it clearly. Civilizations rise with agriculture, trade and memory, and they decline with drought, war, and neglect. None is eternal. The Sumerians, the Maya, the Indus Valley dwellers, the countless unnamed cultures scattered across continents, all left traces, some faint, some grand, all eventually silent. Yet the impulse itself did not vanish. When one civilization fell, another appeared, not as a direct heir, but as another branch, another flowering. This is the rhythm of culture. Emergence, flourishing, disappearance, recurrence. Each is impermanent, but the wheel continues to turn. If this is true for us, how? Much more so for the civilizations of animals. A whale song may last a decade, then fade as new notes replace it. A crow's tool-making tradition may flourish for centuries, then vanish with a storm or a loss of elders. A beaver dam may shape a valley for generations, then collapse into silt. A termite mound may endure decades, then crumble to soil. Each is real while it lasts, yet each is fragile. None leaves monuments in stone, none carves laws into marble, none records itself in writing. And so their civilizations rise and fade like waves, leaving little behind but the moment itself. Yet this impermanence does not erase their meaning. It reveals that civilization is not permanence but recurrence, not endurance but renewal. It is a wheel that turns again and again. In whales, in birds, in primates, in insects, in us. To reflect on this is to feel humility and awe together. For it means that our own culture, vast though it seems, is part of the same pattern. We may build skyscrapers, launch satellites, archive billions of words, but we too are bound by the wheel. One day our towers will crumble, our archives will decay, our signals will fade. What will remain are fragments, chemical signatures in rock, plastics fused into sediment, isotopes scattered across soil. Our civilization, like all others, is impermanent. Yet that impermanence does not diminish its worth. It places us within the greater rhythm, reminding us that to exist at all is to take one turn of the wheel, to join in the chorus that has been sung for ages. Evolution itself is shaped by cycles. Traits emerge, flourish, disappear, sometimes to return in altered form. Intelligence, too, may be such a trait. It appears in primates, in birds, in cephalopods, in whales, each time in different forms, sometimes flourishing, sometimes fading. Culture arises where intelligence and sociality meet, where memory and cooperation align. It may fade when conditions change, only to return in another branch, another lineage, another epoch. Civilization, then, is not destiny, but possibility, recurring again and again, sometimes briefly, sometimes enduring, always fragile, always real in its moment. This perspective changes how we see ourselves. No longer at the pinnacle, we are one branch among many, one verse in a long song, one turn of the wheel. Our uniqueness lies not in being alone, but in being part of the chorus, in recognizing the pattern and reflecting on it. To accept impermanence is not to despair, but to marvel. For within impermanence lies renewal, within disappearance lies recurrence, within fragility lies beauty. Civilization does not need eternity to matter. It needs only memory carried together, however briefly, however softly. The wheel of culture may even extend beyond Earth. If life exists elsewhere, if intelligence flowers on other worlds, its civilizations too will follow this rhythm: emergence, flourishing, disappearance. Some may leave monuments we will never see. Some may leave traces erased by their planets. Some may vanish without a sign. Yet the pattern itself, the possibility of recurrence, may be universal. Life remembers wherever it finds a way, and memory, shared, becomes civilization. We are not alone in principle, even if we are alone in fact. The wheel turns here. It may turn elsewhere too. As the night deepens, these thoughts settle like layers of sediment, each one fragile yet accumulating into something larger. Civilizations rise and fall, but the impulse recurs. Evolution branches and loops, but memory persists in different forms. We are part of a wheel far older than our species, far larger than our cities, far deeper than our history. To know this is to rest more easily within it, to let go of the illusion of permanence, to embrace the rhythm of recurrence. Civilization is not a monument to be preserved forever, but a song to be sung while it can, a memory to be shared while it lasts, a flame to be passed before it fades. And so the story comes full circle, from whales singing across oceans to birds decorating bowers, from beavers damming rivers to insects cultivating gardens, from primates teaching traditions to humans recording history, all a part of the same wheel. Each rises, flourishes, fades. Each is impermanent, but each contributes to the chorus of life. The wheel turns endlessly, and we turn with it. Civilization is not a ladder we climb, but a circle we join, again and again, across species, across time, across the fragile, beautiful span of existence. The night closes gently with this thought, like a page turned softly in the dark. Impermanence is not loss but rhythm, recurrence not repetition but renewal. Civilization is a wheel, and we are part of its turning. And when our own turn is done, others will rise, as they always have, as they always will. The song will continue, the wheel will turn, the chorus will never truly end. The night is very quiet now, the kind of quiet that feels less like absence and more like fullness, as though the air itself were listening. We have traveled far together, through seas and forests, across plains and under earth, guided by songs and structures, by fragile evidence and recurring patterns. We have seen whales carrying their traditions across entire oceans, their voices weaving through water like threads of memory. We have stood by the edge of beaver ponds, watching the slow persistence of dams that turn streams into worlds alive with new life. We have looked upon the towers of termites, spires of soil that breathe with the rhythm of hidden cities. And, each time, we ask the same question. What if this is more than instinct? What if this is culture? What if this is civilization in another form? Now, at the close of this long wandering, The images come back again, softened by distance, made gentle by reflection. A whale's song, carried in the dark water, rising and falling like a tide of thought. A beaver pond, still under moonlight, its surface reflecting the stars, the quiet hum of insects at its edges. A termite spire, warm in the night air, its hidden chambers alive with movement, unseen but unbroken. These are not our monuments, not our languages, not our cities, and yet they feel familiar. They feel like answers to a question we have been asking since the beginning. What does it mean to live in civilization? Perhaps it means only this: to remember together, to share knowledge across generations, to shape the world not alone but in company. If that is so, then civilization is everywhere, scattered across the branches of life, like sparks in a dark sky. Some sparks burn for millennia, some for seasons, some for only a moment, but all are real while they shine. Civilization, then, is not a ladder climbed once and for all, but a pattern that appears wherever memory and cooperation meet. It is a wheel that turns in whales and birds, in primates and insects, in beavers and humans alike. To recognize this is to widen our circle, to step back and see ourselves not as isolated, but as part of a chorus too large to measure. And yet the earth forgets, as it always has. Songs vanish when singers die, bowers rot when seasons turn, dams collapse when floods arrive, spires crumble when rains wash them away. Evidence is fragile, memory is mortal. Civilizations rise and fade without monuments, without records, without stone to preserve their stories. How many have come and gone unnoticed? How many cultures bloomed for a moment, alive and meaningful, only to disappear without leaving a trace for us to see? The question cannot be answered, but it can be carried, like a pebble in the pocket of thought, a weight so small you barely feel it until you reach for it and realize it is still there. Science searches for evidence, carefully, cautiously, sifting through sediments and signals, distinguishing accident from design, instinct from tradition. Philosophy asks what counts as culture, what deserves the name civilization. But imagination, quiet, unhurried, asks another question. What if civilization is not rare, not unique, not fragile in the way we think? What if it has always been here, all around us, countless times, countless forms, fleeting but real? What if the earth has always been alive with civilizations, most of them unnoticed, most of them forgotten, each complete in its own way, each a voice in a chorus we are only beginning to hear? This is not a question to solve, but a question to rest with. Like the sound of waves against the shore, it is not meant to end, but to continue, to soothe, to remind us that the world is larger than what we know. To imagine civilizations everywhere is not to diminish our own, but to place it in context, to see it as one verse among many. It makes us humbler, yes, but also more connected, more in awe of the fragile beauty of memory shared, of traditions past, of worlds shaped by creatures who may never know the word civilization, but who live it nonetheless. So the night closes, as it began, with simple images: a whale singing in the dark ocean, a beaver pond reflecting starlight, a termite tower breathing in the quiet, each a civilization in its moment, each a reminder that life remembers in ways beyond our own. And in this stillness, one final question drifts gently forward, not to startle, but to soothe. If civilizations can begin anywhere life chooses to share knowledge, how many have come and gone unnoticed? How many are alive around us even now, waiting quietly for us to recognize them? The question lingers, then softens, then fades. The air is calm, the stars are steady, the earth turns as it always has. You are left with the quiet rhythm of breath, the steady heartbeat of night, and the feeling that the world is deeper than it seems, richer than we know, filled with civilizations that may vanish without record, but never without meaning. And As your eyes close, the wheel of culture turns once more, carrying you with it, gently, endlessly, into rest. When we hear the word civilization, the mind tends to leap towards certain familiar images. Vast stone walls rising against the sky, pyramids cut with impossible precision, roads that stretch in straight lines across valleys, and libraries where words are locked in ink. These images feel definitive, as if the essence of civilization is tied to stone, metal, and written memory. But perhaps those images are not definitions so much as one version of a broader pattern. To understand whether animals might hold proto-civilizations, we first need to loosen our grip on the narrow outline we have inherited and consider what truly lies at the heart of civilization. Civilization, in its simplest form, is often described as the complex organization of human societies. It carries connotations of agriculture, trade, governance, art, and law. Yet if we strip away the human-centric details, what remains are a few essential ingredients. Knowledge passed across generations, the shaping of environments to suit collective needs, cooperation that extends beyond immediate survival, and some form of symbolic or aesthetic expression. These are the roots, and they need not appear in the same order or intensity every time. They can be partial, fleeting, or subtle. They can emerge in places where no city will ever rise and where no alphabet will ever take shape. Consider knowledge passed on. This is more than instinct coded in genes. It is behavior that must be learned, imitated, and refined. A young chimpanzee watches an elder crack open nuts with a stone, learns the rhythm, the pressure, the patience required. A young whale follows its pod and memorizes the song that binds them. A beaver kit joins in repairing a dam, guided not by instinct alone, but by the demonstration of its parents. These are acts of teaching and learning, of continuity beyond the individual life. And continuity is the foundation of history. Next is the shaping of environments. Civilization, in any guise, does not simply accept the landscape, it alters it. Humans irrigate fields, terrace mountains, and raise walls. Beavers transform flowing streams into still ponds that last decades, changing the distribution of plants and animals. Termites erect mounds that alter soil composition and local climate. Ants cultivate fungi in carefully maintained chambers. In each case, the environment becomes more than a backdrop. It becomes a canvas on which collective knowledge is written. Cooperation too lies at the center. No civilization, human or otherwise, thrives in isolation. It depends on shared effort, on networks of individuals aligning their actions toward common ends. In human history, this has meant everything from collective hunting to urban planning. In animal societies, cooperation is equally vital. Dolphins coordinate hunts with roles that shift mid-chase. Wolves orchestrate movements during a pursuit, each individual adapting to the others. Insects divide labor across thousands, some tending young, some gathering food, others defending. While the form differs, the principle holds. Cooperation expands possibility. Then there is expression, the element most difficult to quantify, yet perhaps most revealing. Humans leave behind art, cave paintings, sculptures, songs, poems, not strictly necessary for survival, but essential for identity. Animals, too, reveal expression. Birds weave nests with flourishes of color. Whales sing with evolving patterns, and some primates mark objects or arrange stones in seemingly symbolic ways. Expression signals that life is not only about surviving, but also about shaping meaning, however subtle, within a community. These four threads, knowledge, environment, cooperation, expression, braid together to form what we usually call civilization. To be clear, humans weave them into patterns of scale and permanence unmatched in other species. We gather in millions, alter continents, transmit knowledge through written language and digital code. Yet the presence of these threads in other creatures suggests that civilization may not be an invention, but a spectrum. Somewhere on that spectrum lies the possibility of proto-civilization, a stage where the ingredients are present, where culture is cumulative, and where the environment reflects the sustained imprint of intention. but where the result has not crystallized into cities or states. The term proto-civilization does not imply incompleteness or inferiority. It implies an alternate form, an earlier chapter, or a parallel path. It honors the complexity of animal cultures without forcing them into human molds. A proto-civilization may lack writing but still hold oral or acoustic traditions. It may lack monuments of stone but still construct landscapes of lasting design. It may lack centralized government but still operate through social rules and collective memory. To recognize proto-civilizations is to acknowledge that the ladder we imagine may instead be a web with many nodes glowing faintly in the dark. Skeptics might argue that animals act from instinct, not culture. They point out that termite mounds or beaver dams are the result of evolved behavior, honed by selection rather than conscious planning. Yet even in human history, much of what we call culture is shaped by forces we do not fully choose. Traditions emerge, languages evolve, practices continue without explicit design, and research increasingly shows that animals adapt, improvise, and transmit behaviors in ways that exceed rigid instinct. Chimpanzees invent new foraging techniques. Birds adjust songs in response to noise or novelty. Whales introduce variations that spread across populations. Instinct provides a frame, but culture colors within and beyond it. Another objection is that animal cultures do not accumulate complexity the way human cultures do. But accumulation is not a binary. It is measured in degrees. Ants have refined fungus farming across millions of years. Beavers continue to shape waterways, generation after generation. Whale songs evolve, diverge, and sometimes merge again, much like human dialects. These are forms of accumulation, slower or subtler perhaps, but no less real. Civilization is not defined only by the height of skyscrapers, but by the persistence of memory across time. If we expand our lens, proto-civilizations might be more common than we realize. The ocean teems with societies whose structures we barely understand. Coral reefs themselves, though not animals acting with intention, are collective architectures that host intricate communities. Elephant herds carry generational memory of migration routes, watering holes, and social bonds that stretch decades. Even octopuses, solitary by nature, reveal sparks of problem-solving and play that hint at dimensions of mind we have barely touched. Each of these glimpses suggests that the line we draw between culture and instinct, between society and survival, is porous. It is important, though, not to romanticize. Proto-civilizations are not utopias hidden in plain sight. They are fragile, fleeting, and vulnerable. A whale population may lose its song traditions if disrupted. A beaver colony may vanish with the loss of a watershed. Termite mounds crumble without constant maintenance. Unlike human civilizations, which can leave ruins visible for millennia, animal proto-civilizations often vanish quickly, erased by natural cycles. Their ephemerality is precisely why they are easy to overlook, and why they deserve our attention. The fleeting nature of their traces does not diminish their reality. As the night deepens and the mind softens, the question becomes less about taxonomy and more about perspective. What do we gain by recognizing proto-civilizations? We gain humility. We see ourselves not as singular pioneers, but as participants in a broader experiment of life. We gain curiosity. We look more closely at the behaviors of other species, not only for utility, but for wonder. And we gain responsibility. If animal cultures exist, then our actions, deforestation, ocean noise, climate change, are not only environmental disruptions, but cultural erasures. To lose a population of whales is to lose a tradition of songs. To dam a river is to silence generations of beavers. Civilization, in this view, is not only ours to build, but ours to protect wherever it flickers. Proto-civilization, then, is not a label to be handed down, but a lens to be applied. Through it, we can see the beaver dam not merely as a pile of branches, but as an engineering project with generational continuity. We can hear a whale's call not merely as sound, but as heritage carried across seas. We can watch a bowerbird, not merely collecting objects, but arranging them in an act of artistry recognized and transmitted. We can regard a termite mound not as instinctive dirt, but as climate architecture sustained through endless cooperation. Each becomes a chapter in a story that is wider than human history. And as you lie here, letting these images settle into thought, you may feel a quiet shift. Civilization is no longer a distant tower of stone or a line on a timeline. It is an atmosphere, a presence, a possibility that surrounds us. It is the art of remembering, shaping, and sharing. It is the signature of life itself, written in ponds and songs and towers of earth. And if civilization can be so many things, then perhaps proto-civilizations are all around us, waiting in the shadows of forests, under the waves of oceans, and in the humming soil beneath our feet. This recognition does not diminish what humans have achieved. It enlarges the stage. It allows us to see ourselves as part of a continuum, rather than perched alone at the pinnacle. And in that continuum, the next steps of our journey will be to explore specific examples of these proto-civilizations. The whales with their symphonies of the deep, the birds with their artistry, the beavers with their hydrological mastery, the insects with their towering cities, and the sediments of earth that may hold faint echoes of civilizations erased. Each story will unfold gently, each one adding a layer, each one asking us to listen more carefully. And as this part closes, a question hovers at the edge of thought, unhurried but insistent. If we recognize these threads as proto-civilizations, how might it change the way we see our own place in the long, ongoing experiment of life? Beneath the surface of the sea, where daylight softens and fades into shades of blue that no paint could capture, a voice begins. It is not the voice of a single whale, but of a lineage, a tradition, a song carried through water that touches shores no human will ever see. The ocean is vast enough to swallow mountains, deep enough to hide canyons greater than the Grand Canyon. Yet what carries across those miles is not stone or current, but sound, low, rolling, resonant, a vibration that can pass through your body if you are near enough to hear it. They observed, through hydrophones dropped into the Pacific and Atlantic, that these songs can travel hundreds, even thousands of miles. Analysis suggested they are not random, but patterned, with verses and refrains that shift slowly over time. The record stated that a song born in one ocean can, over the course of years, drift across entire basins, reshaping itself as it spreads, much like a folk tune learned and re-sung across villages separated by mountains. To listen is to realize that whales do not simply call, they remember, they teach, and they improvise. Scientists have been recording these voices for decades, and in those recordings lies a quiet astonishment. In the 1970s, when hydrophones first revealed the eerie complexity of humpback whale songs, people were startled. Here were not random groans or cries, but structured compositions, sequences lasting up to half an hour, repeated and varied with a sense of rhythm and form. Some portions were hauntingly melodic, rising like the swell of a cello, others deep and guttural, like the sound of earth shifting. What startled listeners most was not only the beauty, but the change. The songs evolved. A theme sung one season might be altered slightly the next, a phrase dropped, a new phrase added. Within a few years, the entire song could transform, with each generation of whales carrying the new version forward. This was not instinct playing on a loop, but culture, flexible and responsive, echoing through the water like an oral tradition. Imagine a young calf, swimming beside its mother in the immensity of the Pacific. It listens not only to her calls, but to the chorus of the pod, the background music of its world. It learns by immersion, the same way a human child picks up language, without explicit instruction, simply by being surrounded. Later, as it matures, it contributes its own variations, small shifts that may or may not take hold. If the variation is appealing or simply gains traction through chance, it spreads. Soon, the whole community is singing it, and the cycle continues. This is cultural drift in real time. It is memory made audible, history etched into sound waves. What makes the phenomenon even more striking is its reach. In 1996, researchers tracked a song that began off the coast of Australia. Over the course of a decade, that song spread eastward, moving across the South Pacific until it reached Wales off the coast of South America. Imagine that, a melody slowly travelling across an entire ocean, carried not by wires or broadcasts, but by living beings who remember and repeat. No human composition has ever travelled in quite that way, body to body, pod to pod, over such distances. To witness it is to realise that the sea is not silent but resonant with history, that every note carries with it the weight of community. The drama lies not only in the scale, but in the intimacy. To place a hydrophone underwater and hear a whale song is to hear something that feels both alien and familiar. The frequencies are often lower than the human ear can fully appreciate, and yet when sped up or shifted, the structure emerges, repeating units, nested phrases, refrains. It is music, not in the metaphorical sense, but in the structural sense. Patterns repeat, modulate, and resolve. Some scientists liken them to jazz, others to symphonies, but the truth is that they are themselves, belonging to no human category. They are the songs of a species that has lived in the ocean for millions of years, carrying its culture in waves of sound. There is also a silence within the song. Whales pause, leaving gaps that may carry meaning as well. In those silences, the ocean itself speaks, the crackle of shrimp, the groan of ice, the shifting of tides. Each silence becomes a canvas upon which the next phrase is painted. Listening feels like floating in an underwater cathedral, the walls made of salt water, the ceiling endless. One cannot help but feel reverence. The song fills the body, passes through bones and blood, and leaves behind a resonance that lingers even after the sound fades. The question naturally arises, what do these songs mean? Scientists tread carefully here. Some argue they are purely reproductive displays, the equivalent of birdsong designed to attract mates. Others believe they may carry social information, coordinating groups or signalling identity. Still others suggest they could be more than practical, that they could be aesthetic in themselves, a form of art sustained for no purpose beyond expression. The evidence is partial, but the mystery is fertile. What matters is that they change, that they spread, that they are learned, meaning, whatever its form, is carried forward. That is enough to place them within the realm of culture. Culture, in this sense, is not limited to humans. It is any knowledge transmitted socially rather than genetically, any tradition that outlives the individual. Whale songs meet that definition as clearly as human ballads do. They are taught, not inherited in DNA. They evolve, not in the span of millennia, but in the span of decades. They link communities across distances unimaginable to land dwellers. They turn the ocean into an archive, a rolling library written in sound. And like all libraries, they are fragile. Noise from ships and sonar can disrupt the songs, drowning them out. Climate change may alter migration routes, fragmenting traditions. To listen today is not only to marvel, but to worry, to wonder how much longer these voices will be allowed to carry. Yet even within that fragility, there is resilience. Songs lost in one region sometimes reappear years later, carried back by wandering individuals. Themes resurface like motifs in a symphony, reminding us that memory in the ocean is not linear, but cyclical. What was once forgotten can be sung again. This persistence speaks to something deep. Whales are not only singers, but archivists, storing history in their bodies, carrying it across seas. They are custodians of memory, and when they raise their voices, they remind us that civilization, proto or otherwise, is as much about continuity as about invention. As you let this thought settle, imagine lying in bed while the ocean hums. Beneath your window, an impossible dream, but one that feels close in this moment. The waves roll, the night deepens, and beneath it all, somewhere far away, A wail begins again. The song is older than you, older than your parents, older than your cities. It is not written down, yet it endures. It will travel long after you. Fall asleep tonight, carried by currents, repeated by voices you will never meet. And in that endurance lies the heart of civilization, the art of remembering together. The song continues, weaving through depths where sunlight never reaches, carried by bodies larger than buses yet moving with a grace that belies their size. To picture a whale is to imagine enormity, but to hear one is to feel intimacy. That paradox is what makes their culture so compelling, vast in scale, delicate in transmission. It is easy to see whales as relics, remnants of a prehistoric world, but in truth they are innovators, curators of memory, shaping soundscapes that rival our own symphonies in complexity. Their voices are reminders that civilization may not always be built with stone. Sometimes it is built with breath. Researchers have discovered that songs are not static, but dynamic, evolving almost like living organisms. One study tracked humpback whales in the Western and Central Pacific over a span of 12 years. In that time, their songs transformed completely, each new version spreading like a wave across populations. The transition was not abrupt, but gradual. Old phrases lingering beside new ones, a kind of cultural layering. Imagine opening a book where the first chapter slowly rewrites itself as you read, until by the end, it tells an entirely new story. That is what whales do with sound. They compose histories in motion, narratives that never stay still but never lose coherence. The continuity is not in the notes themselves, but in the act of sharing, of remembering together. Listening to these songs, some scientists have begun to wonder whether whales experience a form of collective identity shaped by sound. Each pod, each region, has its own dialect, its own repertoire. Individuals who move between regions can act as cultural bridges, carrying fragments of song across oceans. These bridges ensure that no community is entirely isolated. The ocean is too vast for constant contact, but through song it becomes a connected world. In this way, whales demonstrate a principle that underlies all civilizations: the creation of networks that bind the distant into a shared whole. If you close your eyes and imagine drifting beneath the surface, the sound becomes the landscape itself. Mountains of coral fade into silhouettes, fish scatter like silver confetti, and through it all, the low pulse of a whale's voice turns water into architecture. The song fills the space like walls, like columns, like arches. You can almost believe you are inside a cathedral of resonance, a structure invisible yet no less real. To whales, perhaps, these sounds are more than communication. They are the shape of their world, the thread that ties individuals into a fabric of belonging. To call it proto-civilization is not to diminish it, but to recognize its dignity, a system of continuity, cooperation, and creativity, carried forward not by stone or script, but by the sheer persistence of song. The fragility of this culture only deepens its poignancy. Unlike ruins of stone, which can persist for centuries even when abandoned, whale songs exist only as long as voices repeat them. If a population falls silent, its tradition vanishes forever. There are no libraries to preserve them, no monuments to safeguard them. The ocean erases quickly, and silence is ruthless. This is why the human-caused disruptions, ship noise, military, sonar, climate shifts, are so perilous. They are not only biological threats, but cultural ones. To drown a song is to sever a lineage, to silence a memory that may have traveled oceans for decades. In this sense, conservation is not only about species, but about civilization. Protecting whales is protecting a tradition as intricate and fragile as any manuscript. And yet, resilience persists. Recordings reveal that when songs are disrupted, whales sometimes adapt, shifting frequency, altering tempo, finding gaps in the noise where their voices can slip through. They improvise, like jazz musicians working around static. They do not surrender easily. Their ability to adapt is part of what sustains their culture. It suggests a flexibility that is itself a hallmark of civilization, the capacity to change while remaining recognizable. Just as human languages evolve to absorb new words, just as our music changes across generations yet still carries echoes of the past, so too do whale songs bend without breaking. Some researchers have speculated that whales may even experience aesthetic preference, that they respond not only to the presence of a song, but to its structure, to novelty, to beauty. This cannot be proved easily, but the evidence is suggestive. Certain variations spread more quickly than others, certain motifs gain traction and persist. If whales are drawn to these patterns, if they choose to repeat them because they are pleasing, then they are not only communicating, but creating art. And if that is true, then their culture is not just proto-civilization, but civilization in its own right, an underwater tradition of music older than our oldest instruments. The image is humbling. A human standing on a ship's deck might feel like a spectator of the sea, but in truth, the sea is full of spectators of us, beings whose lives span decades, whose songs echo across horizons. They are not background, but participants, shaping a world parallel to ours. To acknowledge their culture is to step off the pedestal of human exceptionalism and recognize that civilization is not singular, but plural. There are many ways to remember, many ways to organize, many ways to create. Ours is only one. As night deepens, imagine again lying in bed while outside the wind carries the faintest scent of salt. Somewhere beyond the reach of sight, a whale begins a song. It may last 30 minutes, only to begin again and again for hours. It may be joined by others, the ocean swelling with harmony, a choir without conductor, yet perfectly in tune. It may travel outward, picked up by another pod, reshaped, carried farther. Long after you have drifted into sleep, that song will continue, circling the planet, whispering through depths where no light can follow. When you wake, it may still be going, the longest lullaby in the world. What then is civilization? Is it stone walls or sound waves? Is it writing on clay or memory carried in flesh? If it is the art of continuity, of tradition shared across generations, then whales have been practicing it long before we recognized it. Their ocean of memory stretches, wider than our archives, deeper than our histories. It is fragile, yes, but fragility does not negate reality. If anything, it makes it more precious. To listen is to hear not only whales, but civilization itself, sung in a language we have yet to translate. As this chapter closes, the question remains, unhurried but insistent. If whales can carry culture across oceans, what else might animals be doing, quietly, patiently, waiting for us to notice? The answer lies ahead, in forests and rivers and fields, where other voices, feathered, furred, and many-legged, are crafting their own traditions. And as we turn to them, the resonance of whale song lingers, a reminder that the sea is not empty, but full of memory, and that civilization may be as fluid and expansive as the ocean itself. The song of the whales drifts away into the horizon of the mind, leaving behind an echo that feels like memory itself. And just as the sea holds its composers, the forest too harbors architects whose creations rise not in sound, but in structure. To step beneath the canopy is to enter another world of culture, one built on wings and branches, a world where art and architecture blur. The air is alive with fluttering, with colors darting between shafts of light, with the rustle of leaves that conceal tiny studios where design is underway. Here, birds do more than survive. They build galleries, stages, and homes that rival our monuments in their intricacy. To watch them is to realize that the forest is not only a place of instinct, but of intention. Bowerbirds in the forests of New Guinea and Australia are perhaps the most striking example. A male selects a patch of ground, clears it of debris, and begins to arrange sticks in an arch or avenue. Around this structure he gathers objects, sometimes hundreds of them, chosen with remarkable discrimination. Blue is a favorite. Berries, petals, plastic caps if they can be found. But other colors too become themes. He arranges them in gradients, larger objects at the edges, smaller toward the center, creating forced perspective that makes the display appear larger to a visiting female. Scientists who measured these layouts found evidence of optical illusions, as if the bird were a natural artist experimenting with perspective centuries before humans developed such techniques. The display is not a nest. It will never hold eggs. It is a canvas, a gallery built for beauty itself. To witness it is to feel the boundary between instinct and artistry dissolve. Imagine watching this scene in the filtered light of morning. A bowerbird darts back and forth, carrying each treasure in its beak. A bright beetle shell glints like enamel. A flower petal wilts and is replaced. A shard of glass flashes among the natural colors. Each placement is deliberate, adjusted, reconsidered. The bird steps back, tilts its head, then shifts an object slightly, as though assessing balance. Researchers who watched noted that males often rearrange their displays daily, fine-tuning as though guided by a sense of aesthetics. Females visit, inspect, sometimes leave without approval. The pressure is high, for mating depends not only on plumage or song but on artistry. Beauty has become currency, and culture has become the medium of survival. What makes the bowerbird's work even more astonishing is the transmission of style. Young males practice by building rudimentary bowers, often clumsy or inconsistent. Over time, they learn by observing older, successful males. They copy techniques, but they also innovate, adding new materials, experimenting with new arrangements. In some regions, particular styles dominate, while in others, different traditions hold sway. This is cultural variation, regional artistry, as if the forest itself were divided into schools of design. Anthropologists might call it folk art. Biologists call it social learning. Whatever the term, the effect is clear. Bowers are not merely instinctual, but cultural, shaped by learning, teaching, and innovation. The quiet drama here is not only in the display, but in what it suggests. If culture is defined by shared traditions, passed across generations, then the bowers are undeniable culture. They are not genetically encoded structures, like a spider's web, identical across the globe. They are variable, flexible, responsive to local conditions, and personal creativity. They resemble human traditions in miniature, local styles, apprenticeships, innovations that either fade or spread. And unlike utilitarian nests built for reproduction, bowers are purely symbolic, existing to communicate beauty, fitness, and creativity. In that sense, they may be closer to art than to architecture. To see them is to realize that the impulse to create beauty may be as ancient and widespread as the impulse to survive. But bowers are not the only architectural marvel in the bird world. Corvids, the family that includes crows, ravens, and magpies, demonstrate a different kind of design. They are tool makers, engineers of function rather than ornament. In the forests of New Caledonia, crows have been observed fashioning hooks from twigs and leaves, tools they use to extract grubs from hidden crevices. They cut, trim, and shape these tools with remarkable precision, sometimes reusing them, sometimes improving them. Young crows watch their parents, learning the techniques, and regional variations emerge. Some groups prefer certain shapes, others different materials. The result is a cultural map of technology, drawn not on paper, but in the memory of a species. Watching. A crow manipulator tool is to watch thought made visible. The bird holds the twig, turns it, tests it, and inserts it into a hole. It pauses, adjusts, and tries again. The patience is striking, the persistence undeniable. Success brings reward. A hidden grub pulled free, nourishment gained through ingenuity. But what matters most is the teaching. Juvenile crows follow, imitate, experiment. They learn not only by instinct, but by observation. This is tradition, a kind of apprenticeship, the same pattern that carries human crafts across generations. In the wings of a crow lies the suggestion of a blacksmith, a carpenter, an inventor. The scale differs. but the essence aligns. These examples, bowers and tools, form a spectrum of bird architecture, from the decorative to the functional, from art to engineering. Together, they suggest that culture among birds is neither rare nor trivial. It is widespread, diverse, and resilient. It has rules and variations, teachers and students, failures and successes. It accumulates knowledge, stores memory, and shapes environments. And in each case, it transcends survival. A bower could be simpler, yet it is elaborate. A tool could be found, yet it is fashioned. These choices point to an intelligence that values more than necessity, that recognizes the power of craft. As the forest darkens with evening, the bowers glow faintly with color, petals and shells reflecting the last light. Corvids roost in high branches, their tools tucked away in caches for tomorrow. The air is filled with a sense of continuity, of traditions being carried forward unseen. The thought lingers. If we call our cathedrals and skyscrapers civilization, why not these? If we define culture as memory shared, then these birds are participants in a parallel story. They may not write histories, but they compose them in sticks and shells. They may not carve monuments, but they raise them in the undergrowth. Civilization may not always stand tall. Sometimes it perches lightly on a branch, waiting for dawn. And as you close your eyes to the rhythm of this thought, the forest hums, softly in the background of imagination. Somewhere in the underbrush, a bower bird is still arranging, still choosing, still adjusting, as if the act of creation itself is never done. Somewhere above, a crow rehearses tomorrow's challenge, turning, a twig in its beak as the stars appear. Civilization, in this moment, is everywhere, written not in stone, but in song, not in concrete, but in feathers. And the night is rich with its presence. Night in the forest is never entirely silent. Insects pulse with rhythm, leaves tremble with unseen movement, and every so often a bird gives a brief call before returning to rest. Among the bowers, colours fade into shadow, but the memory of their brightness lingers. The petals, shells, and feathers carefully arranged by daylight now lie in darkness, awaiting the return of the sun. Yet their meaning does not disappear with the light. The structures remain, carrying intention across hours and days, a continuity that belongs not to instinct alone, but to the persistence of culture. Each bower is both ephemeral and enduring, ephemeral because it will wilt, decay, or be abandoned in time, enduring because the pattern of its creation is passed from one bird to the next, echoing across generations. There is something humbling about these small monuments. They are not built to last centuries, yet they hold within them the same impulse that raised cathedrals, the desire to impress, to communicate, to give shape to something inward. To see a bower is to see not only a courtship display, but a symbol of civilization in miniature, a whisper of what culture means when it takes form in sticks and petals rather than stone and glass. And just as our cities are judged by visitors, so too are the bowers, evaluated by the discerning eyes of females who decide which creation speaks most powerfully. Selection here is not only natural, but cultural. Beauty itself becomes a criterion of survival. This interplay of beauty and survival is a reminder that culture is never separate from life's practical needs, yet it transcends them. For humans, art enriches existence, binds communities, and communicates identity. For birds, art too shapes destiny. A male who masters arrangement, who learns the nuances of perspective and color, increases his chances of passing on his genes. But beyond that, he participates in a tradition that has been refined over millennia, a tradition of creation that is not reducible to biology alone. It is as if life itself, across species, seeks ways to express meaning beyond the necessities of feeding and shelter. Civilization begins in such gestures where expression becomes inheritance. Beyond bowers and tools, there are countless other avian examples that expand this story. Weaver birds construct elaborate hanging nests, intricately woven spheres that sway in the breeze, demonstrating not only skill, but regional variation. Some populations favor tight weaves, others looser patterns, suggesting cultural drift in design. Satin bowerbirds are known to collect man-made objects when available, incorporating bits of glass or plastic into their displays. Magpies have been seen arranging shiny trinkets in ways that appear decorative, raising questions about their sense of aesthetics. Each of these behaviors adds a thread to the tapestry of avian culture, suggesting that the forest is alive not only with survival, but with tradition. The cumulative effect of these traditions is what matters most. A single bower, a single tool, may be dismissed as instinct. But when seen together, when we recognize that young birds learn by watching, that regional styles persist, that innovation spreads, the picture becomes clearer. This is culture, knowledge not fixed in genes but carried in memory, transmitted socially, evolving over time. This is the essence of proto-civilization, where behaviors accumulate into systems that shape both individuals and environments. The forest, in this view, is not only habitat but archive, recording the works of countless bird architects who came before. There is a subtle drama in realizing how easily such cultures can be lost. If a population declines, its traditions may vanish with it. A unique style of bower, a particular technique of tool-making, can disappear forever if not carried forward. Unlike human civilizations, which sometimes leave ruins and records, avian cultures leave few durable traces. Their monuments are fragile, their archives living. This fragility makes them no less real, only more precious. It also reminds us that the civilizations of the Earth may be more numerous than we know, their memory erased by time's patient hand. To honor them requires attention in the present, a willingness to see significance in what might otherwise be overlooked. As you imagine the forest now, picture the bowers again, not only as courtship displays but as galleries of memory. Each object chosen is a note in a song of design, each arrangement a verse in a tradition older than human art. Picture the crows and ravens, their tools hidden in caches, waiting for tomorrow's tasks. Picture the weaver birds, their nests swaying, like lanterns against the night sky. These are not accidents of instinct, but the architecture of culture, fragile yet enduring in their own way. They are evidence that civilization is not only ours to claim, but ours to recognize in the lives around us. The question then arises, if these avian traditions qualify as proto-civilizations, what does that mean for our definition of civilization itself? Perhaps it means that civilization is not defined by scale, but by continuity. Perhaps it means that art, architecture, and technology are not uniquely human, but universal possibilities. Wherever life evolves the capacity for memory and imitation. Civilization, in this light, is not a pinnacle, but a spectrum. We stand on it alongside the birds, part of a chorus, rather than a solo. The recognition does not diminish us. It enlarges the story. And so the forest remains alive with quiet civilizations, hidden among branches and undergrowth. They do not write chronicles, but they pass knowledge. They do not raise skyscrapers, but they build monuments of beauty and function. They do not govern by law, but they govern by tradition. If we allow ourselves to see them, we realize that civilization is not one thing but many, not limited to us, but shared across the fabric of life. This realization carries both wonder and responsibility. To protect these birds is not only to conserve species, but to preserve cultures, to safeguard traditions as real and intricate as any of our own. The night deepens further, and with it comes a sense of stillness. The bowers lie quiet, the tools tucked away, the nests swaying. Yet in the minds of the birds, memory endures. At dawn, they will resume their work, rearranging, refining, teaching, learning. The forest will come alive with the sound of wings, with the glint of objects carried in beaks, with the rustle of creation. Civilization will rise again, not in stone, but in feather and leaf. And as you drift toward rest, the thought lingers like a gentle refrain. Perhaps art is not an invention, but an inheritance. And perhaps civilization is not a fortress of stone, but a song of memory sung in many voices. Morning light filters through, the canopy in dappled streams, touching the ground in shifting patches of gold. The forest, awake again, fills with distant calls, rustling leaves, and the hum of countless unseen lives. Within this living mosaic, primates stir. Their presence feels familiar in a way that birds and whales do not. For in their gestures, faces, and eyes, we see echoes of ourselves. They move with a blend of curiosity and caution. And in their habits, we find not just survival, but something that resembles our own traditions. Behaviors taught, remembered, and passed along, shaping communities in ways that reach beyond instinct. Chimpanzees, among our closest relatives, provide some of the clearest glimpses into non-human culture. In the forests of West Africa, researchers have documented groups that crack nuts with stones, an art not shared by all populations, but passed from mother to offspring in particular regions. A young chimp watches her mother carefully select a hammerstone, position a nut upon an anvil, and strike with practiced precision. She tries, fails, tries again, and over months or years develops the skill. It is not inborn, it must be learned. This behavior, once established, persists for generations, spreading within the group, but not automatically appearing in others. It is culture, localized and enduring, as distinctive as a regional recipe or craft in human society. Elsewhere, other traditions emerge. In some forests, chimps use long sticks to fish termites from mounds, a practice that requires patience and dexterity. In others, they fashion spears from sharpened branches to hunt small animals, demonstrating not only tool use, but foresight. Each of these practices is not universal, but regional, evidence of innovation, transmission, and variation. They resemble the folkways of human communities, unique to place and lineage. If civilization begins with continuity of knowledge, then these chimpanzees are already standing at its threshold. The quiet drama of these traditions lies in their fragility. A single generation gap can sever a chain of learning. If a skilled mother is lost, her offspring may never master the technique. Unlike genetic inheritance, cultural inheritance depends on presence, patience, and imitation. This fragility makes it precious. It means that each act of teaching is also an act of preservation, that every moment of shared learning is a thread in a tapestry that stretches back through decades. The forest becomes not just a habitat, but a classroom, a place where knowledge is rehearsed daily in the hands of those who will carry it forward. Orangutans, solitary by nature, nonetheless carry traditions that reflect culture. In Borneo and Sumatra, researchers have noted regional variations in vocal calls, gestures, and foraging techniques. Some groups fashion leafy umbrellas to shield themselves from rain, a behavior not observed everywhere. Others use branches to scratch or leaves to amplify their calls. These are not universal instincts but localized habits, learned by observation. In one forest, a young orangutan may never see an umbrella of leaves, while in another, it becomes a familiar sight. The difference is not genetic but cultural, evidence that even in solitude, traditions can take root and endure. Macaques in Japan have become famous for their practice of washing sweet potatoes. The story began in the 1950s when one young female, named Emo by researchers, began rinsing her food in a stream before eating it. Others observed, imitated, and soon the habit spread through the troop. Younger monkeys adopted it more readily than older ones, illustrating the generational dynamics of cultural change. What began as an innovation by one individual became a tradition carried by many, passed down as part of the group's identity. This was not instinct, but invention, memory, and imitation, the hallmarks of culture in action. What binds these examples together is not only the behavior itself, but the way it is transmitted. Primates learn socially, by watching and copying, by practicing under the guidance of elders. They remember, refine, and sometimes innovate. They preserve traditions that mark one group as distinct from another. A chimpanzee from one forest may not recognize the foraging tricks of another. An orangutan from one valley may never imagine the umbrella used in another. These differences are not genetic boundaries but cultural ones, invisible yet real, shaping the identity of each group as surely as language or custom shapes ours. To call this proto-civilization is not to overstate, but to acknowledge. Civilization begins when knowledge survives the individual, when it becomes part of a collective memory. In primates, we see this clearly: the persistence of practices that outlive their inventors, the accumulation of traditions that bind communities, the evolution of behaviors that change over time. They may not build cities, but they build histories in action. They may not write chronicles, but they inscribe memory into behavior. And in that inscription lies the seed of civilization. There is also a sense of expression, subtle but present. Primates engage in play, in gestures that appear symbolic, in vocalizations that vary regionally. Some chimpanzees have been observed drumming on tree roots, producing resonant sounds that carry across distances. The meaning is debated. Perhaps communication, perhaps display. But the act itself feels close to music, to rhythm shared in community. Orangutans produce long calls that differ by region, forming vocal dialects. These expressions are not purely utilitarian. They carry identity, perhaps even artistry. They remind us that culture does not always wear the face of necessity, but sometimes the smile of creativity. As the sun climbs higher, the forest fills with these lives carrying forward their traditions. A young chimp persists in cracking nuts, determined to master the skill that her mother has displayed. An orangutan folds leaves over its head as rain begins, a gesture learned from observation. A troop of macaques moves to the riverbank, rinsing sweet potatoes in water as if the act were a ritual as old as memory. Each moment is small, fleeting, yet together they compose a larger story. That of a species shaping its world not only through instinct, but through culture. The fragility of these traditions mirrors our own histories. Human civilizations, too, have risen and fallen, their knowledge sometimes lost when libraries burned or teachers perished. The difference is one of scale, not essence. We preserve knowledge in stone, paper, and code, while primates preserve it in memory and practice. Both are vulnerable, both require transmission, both depend on continuity. In this sense, the forest and the city are not so far apart. They are both classrooms where culture is rehearsed, refined, and remembered. As you lie back and let these images drift through your thoughts, the line between us and them softens. Civilization no longer feels like an exclusive inheritance, but a shared possibility. It is written not only in monuments, but in actions, not only in archives, but in habits. It exists wherever knowledge is remembered together. And in that sense, the traditions of primates are not just curiosities, but reminders that civilization has many roots, some deep in the forests, some in the oceans, some in the skies. The day in the forest begins to quiet as heat rises. The calls of primates echo through the canopy, fading into the distance. Their traditions continue, unseen but unbroken. The thought lingers. If such traditions can thrive here, fragile yet enduring, what other proto-civilizations might be hidden in the world, waiting for us to notice? The answer lies ahead, in rivers reshaped by beavers, in towers raised by termites, in sediments that record what life has chosen to remember. Civilization, it seems, is not singular, but plural, not bound to us but shared with countless others. And that realization is both humbling and profound, a lullaby of continuity whispered by the living world. The forest quiets as the primates withdraw into shade, their traditions folded gently into the day. Beyond the trees, a river winds its course, gleaming in the afternoon light. Its current whispers the story of time, of erosion and flow, of landscapes carved over ages. Yet here too, culture leaves its mark, and it does so through an unlikely engineer, the beaver, a creature whose teeth are chisels and whose memory is blueprint. Where a river might have run swift and narrow, the presence of beavers transforms it, slowing, widening, creating new worlds where before there were none. Their work is not instinct alone, but the persistence of tradition, passed down through families, maintained across generations, reshaping ecosystems in ways that echo the beginnings of civilization itself. To witness a beaver dam is to see intention etched into water. Branches are felled and carried, mud is packed, stones are positioned with care. The structure holds back the current, raising water levels, forming ponds where fish, amphibians, and birds find refuge. What was once a narrow stream becomes a mosaic of habitats. Dragonflies hover above reeds, herons stalk through shallows, trout find cool pools to rest. The beaver's design ripples outward, altering not only the river, but the entire landscape. This is niche construction on a monumental scale, achieved not by machines, but by generations of teeth and memory. And like all monuments, it is maintained, repaired, expanded, evidence of continuity that binds past and future together. Imagine a family of beavers at work in twilight. The parents drag branches through water, their bodies sleek, their movements deliberate. Young kits follow, imitating, nibbling twigs, practicing the motions that one day will sustain them. They watch, they learn, they participate. The dam is not the product of instinct acting in isolation, but of tradition reinforced through teaching. Studies have shown that young beavers improve their construction skills by observing elders, refining their techniques over time. Just as human children learn to stack stones or lay bricks, beaver kits learn to interlace sticks, to sense the flow of water, to place materials where the current is strongest. This is apprenticeship, quiet but unmistakable, carried out in streams instead of workshops. The drama lies not only in the building but in the consequences. By altering waterways, beavers become architects of entire ecosystems. Their ponds slow floods, recharge groundwater, filter sediments, and create wetlands that support astonishing biodiversity. In places where beavers have returned after long absence, landscapes rebound, streams hold water longer, meadows bloom, species reappear. Ecologists sometimes call them keystone species, for their presence supports a network of life far larger than themselves. But beyond ecology, their work resonates as culture. To maintain a dam across seasons requires knowledge, memory, and cooperation. It requires a sense of purpose that transcends the individual, binding families into communities. This is proto-civilization written in mud and branch. There is poetry in the way time flows differently in a beaver pond. Without the dam, a stream rushes, carrying soil downstream, eroding banks, changing swiftly. With the dam, water lingers, sediments settle, layers build, and a different kind of memory is written into the earth. Sediment becomes archive, pond becomes chapter, and the beaver's design becomes a history that outlives its builders. Archaeologists studying ancient sediments have sometimes identified the traces of beaver ponds long vanished, their signatures detectable in soil composition and plant remains. In this way, the work of beavers becomes part of geology, woven into the long story of the planet. Their dams are not only immediate shelters, but contributions to deep time, echoes of civilization, preserved in the Earth's pages. Consider the rhythm of their labor. At dusk they emerge, their silhouettes rippling across the surface. They dive, resurface with branches, adjust the structure, slap the water with their tails when alarmed. Their actions are methodical, repeated night after night, yet always responsive to conditions. If a flood breaches the dam, they repair. If new currents emerge, they adapt. This adaptability is itself a form of intelligence, a responsiveness that mirrors human engineering. A dam is never finished. It is always in process, always negotiated with the living river. Civilization, too, is never static. It is built, rebuilt, adapted to changing times. In this, the beavers remind us that permanence is an illusion and that continuity lies not in completion, but in maintenance. Beaver lodges, too, carry the imprint of tradition. These domed structures, built from sticks and mud, rise from ponds like floating houses. Inside, tunnels lead to chambers lined with wood shavings, dry and warm even in winter. Families huddle together, safe from predators and storms. To build such a lodge requires cooperation, planning, and memory. Entrances are hidden beneath water, making them secure, while ventilation shafts allow air to circulate. Generations occupy these lodges, repairing them season after season. They are not mere shelters, but homes, designed and maintained with communal effort, echoing the principle that civilization begins with the shared creation of safe space. What deepens the wonder is how quickly landscapes respond. Satellite images reveal the contrast. Streams without beavers appear thin, meandering lines. Streams with beavers blossom into networks of ponds and wetlands. Entire valleys transform, visible from space, because of creatures no larger than a small dog. This is engineering scaled far beyond the size of the builder, a testament to the collective power of tradition. It is difficult not to see in it the signature of civilization, not of cities and walls, but of water and life. A design that persists not in stone, but in living systems. As you drift into the rhythm of this thought, imagine lying beside such a pond at night. The water is still, broken only by the ripple of a swimming beaver. Frogs call, insects hum, stars reflect in dark pools. The dam hums quietly with the sound of trickling water, a steady heartbeat that holds the pond together. Around you, countless lives depend on this structure, yet none but the beavers know how to maintain it. Civilization, in this moment, is audible in the hush of water, visible in the mirrored sky, tangible in the branches interlaced beneath the surface. It is fragile, yes, but it is real. A monument built not for glory, but for survival, not for conquest, but for continuity. And as the night deepens, the thought returns. If such culture exists in creatures so often overlooked, how many other civilizations might be hidden in plain sight, waiting to be recognized? The whales carried songs across oceans. The birds built galleries in forests. The primates preserved traditions in their hands. And here, the beavers build with water itself, reshaping landscapes with memory and cooperation. Civilization, it seems, is not confined to us. It is scattered across the earth, each species carrying a fragment, a variation, a reflection of a possibility as old as life. The beaver pond, glowing faintly under moonlight, is one such reflection, an open invitation to see the world differently. By dawn, mist drifts low across the pond, curling above the water's surface like smoke from an invisible fire. The dam lies quiet, but its presence is unmistakable, holding back the current, bending the river to a new rhythm. If you walk the edge of the pond, you notice signs of last night's labor. Freshly gnawed stumps, branches stripped of bark, muddy paths, worn by countless journeys between forest and water. The beavers themselves have retreated into their lodge, hidden beneath the surface, where tunnels lead to chambers dry and warm. There, in the dim interior, a family rests together, bound not only by blood, but by a shared inheritance of skill. The kits that nuzzle against their parents are not merely learning to eat and swim. They are absorbing lessons in architecture, in tradition, in the art of reshaping the world. The work of beavers may appear simple, yet the complexity lies in its effects. Wetlands created by dams store water during droughts, reducing the harshness of dry seasons. They capture sediments, improving water quality downstream. They create refuges where fish spawn and amphibians thrive. Migratory birds stop at ponds that did not exist a generation before, feeding in meadows shaped by beaver labor. Even predators benefit. Wolves hunt deer that come to drink. Herons stalk frogs that flourish in the shallows. Otters glide through channels carved by diverted streams. The beaver becomes not only an engineer, but a host, offering habitat to an entire community. This generosity is unintentional, yet it mirrors the civic function of human civilizations, where cities provide markets, roads, and institutions that support countless lives beyond their builders. And like our own cities, beaver dams require constant upkeep. Branches decay, floods break sections, predators disturb the work. Maintenance is nightly, seasonal, eternal. A dam left unattended will fail, and with it the pond will drain, the ecosystem collapse. Continuity demands attention. This, too, is the essence of civilization. The recognition that survival is not a one-time act, but a continuous effort, that permanence is built through constant care. Each generation of beavers inherits not only a structure, but the responsibility to maintain it, to keep alive a tradition of water management that stretches back millions of years. It is easy to imagine beavers as unconscious builders, guided only by instinct, but research suggests a more flexible intelligence. They adapt to conditions, responding to sound and flow, adjusting their structures to changing currents. In experiments, recordings of running water placed near dams triggered building behavior, as though the sound itself were a blueprint. Yet, beavers are not locked into rigid patterns. They innovate, altering materials and designs depending on what is available. In this adaptability lies a key element of culture: responsiveness to circumstance, creativity within tradition, the ability to balance memory with improvisation. If one lingers long enough by a pond, one begins to notice how time itself feels different here. Streams move quickly, rushing to the sea, but ponds hold time, slowing its passage. Reflections linger on the surface, clouds stretch longer, ripples take their time to fade. In this suspended rhythm, it becomes easier to imagine that civilization might always have begun with water. Human history tells us that the earliest cities rose beside rivers, nourished by floods and fertile soil. In their way, beavers have been modeling this truth for ages, demonstrating that water harnessed is life multiplied. Their ponds are microcosms of the first agricultural settlements, where the manipulation of water turned wilderness into community. To see a beaver pond is to glimpse not only animal culture, but the very principle upon which our own civilizations were founded. The lodge itself deepens the sense of parallel. Within its walls lies warmth, safety, continuity. The chambers are lined, repaired, expanded as families grow. Entry is gained only by swimming underwater, a hidden doorway that provides security from predators. Ventilation shafts allow air to circulate. These are not random piles but planned structures, refined over countless generations. Archaeologists of the future, stumbling upon the remnants of such lodges fossilized in sediment, might be forgiven for mistaking them for the works of some forgotten civilization. They are homes in the truest sense, designed spaces that meet needs both immediate and enduring. And like human homes, they are more than shelter. They are places of teaching, of nurturing, of inheritance. The continuity of beaver culture also reaches into myth and history. Indigenous peoples of North America long recognized the significance of beavers, weaving them into stories as teachers, builders, and symbols of industriousness. To them, the beaver was not merely an animal, but a cultural figure, embodying the principle that to shape the world is to live in harmony with it. In these stories, we hear an echo of recognition. Humans saw in the beaver a mirror of themselves, an engineer whose works resonated with the logic of civilization. Modern science, centuries later, confirms what traditional knowledge already knew, that the beaver's work is not accidental, but formative, not instinct alone, but culture sustained. There is, however, fragility hidden in this resilience. When beavers were hunted nearly to extinction for their pelts, countless wetlands vanished. Rivers ran unchecked, valleys dried, ecosystems withered. The absence of beavers was not only a biological loss, but a cultural one. Their traditions of dam building were broken in places where populations collapsed, their apprenticeships cut short, their memories severed. The return of beavers in recent decades has begun to restore not only species but culture, as young once again learn to build, as landscapes remember the shape of ponds. In this, we see how culture is inseparable from survival. To lose a population is to lose its civilization, and to restore it is to rekindle traditions long silent. As night falls again, the pond glows faintly in the starlight. Water murmurs over the dam, a lullaby written in liquid and wood. Beneath the surface, the beaver family stirs, adjusting, repairing, preparing for another night of work. Their efforts are unseen by most, yet the consequences radiate across miles and decades. Civilization in this quiet valley is not marble or iron, but branches and mud. No less intricate for its simplicity, the beavers have written their legacy in water, and the earth remembers it in sediment and soil, in forests that bloom around ponds, in species that thrive where dams hold strong. And as you close your eyes to the rhythm of this thought, you may realize that the boundaries of civilization are softer than we once believed. They are drawn not only around cities but around ponds, not only on maps but on landscapes reshaped by memory and tradition. The whales sing, the birds build, the primates teach, and here the beavers engineer. Each is a voice in the chorus of culture, each a reminder that we are not alone in shaping the world. And tomorrow, as the beavers emerge once more into the twilight, their work will continue as it has for ages, as it will for ages to come. An unbroken tradition of water and memory, a civilization written in ripples. When the ponds of the beavers settle into stillness, the imagination drifts further, beyond streams and rivers, into lands warmed by sun and swept by wind. Here the earth itself rises in strange forms, towers of soil and saliva sculpted with precision, fortresses that breathe, regulate, and endure. These are not human monuments, though they might be mistaken for them at a distance. They are the works of insects, termites, ants, and other builders whose civilizations hum beneath the surface, hidden yet immense. If beavers are engineers of water, then these creatures are architects of air and earth, raising cities that rival our own in scale when measured against their bodies. To step into their world is to enter a parallel architecture, one that stretches back millions of years, one that speaks of continuity, cooperation, and culture. Termite mounds stand as silent testaments to collective intelligence. In the savannas of Africa and the grasslands of Australia, they rise like weathered spires, some taller than a person, some reaching heights that, scaled to human size, would rival skyscrapers. Their surfaces are rough, patterned by wind and rain, but within lies a complexity astonishing in its precision. Ventilation shafts draw cool air into the structure, channels guide heat outward, and internal chambers maintain humidity and temperature within narrow ranges, perfect for cultivating the fungi upon which the colony depends. These mounds are not simply shelters but climate-controlled palaces, designed and maintained by countless individuals acting in concert, none of whom can see the whole, yet all of whom contribute to its form. To look upon them is to feel that civilization is not always the product of central planning, but can emerge from collective tradition, from memory stored not in books, but in behavior repeated across generations. At dusk, as the air cools, termites emerge, carrying grains of soil in their jaws, placing them with delicate precision. Each addition is small, almost imperceptible, yet together they create vast structures that stand for decades. The mound grows slowly, layer by layer, like sediment, building into rock, like memory accumulating into culture. No single termite knows the design, but the colony does. Their collective behavior functions as blueprint, guiding construction with remarkable resilience. If part of the mound is damaged, they repair it. If airflow changes, they adjust. Their architecture is alive, adaptive, a reflection of intelligence distributed across thousands of bodies. This distributed memory is itself a form of culture, not held in any one individual, but carried collectively, sustained through repetition, reinforced by success. Ants, too, are master builders, their cities hidden beneath the soil, invisible, yet immense. Some colonies stretch across miles, with millions of individuals coordinating their work. Underground tunnels branch and connect, chambers serve as nurseries, pantries, and farms. Leafcutter ants, in particular, cultivate fungi with extraordinary care, cutting fragments of leaves, carrying them in endless lines, placing them in subterranean gardens where they serve as substrate for fungal growth. The ants do not eat the leaves directly. They eat the fungi they cultivate. This is agriculture in miniature, a tradition sustained for millions of years, long before humans planted their first crops. It is civilization hidden beneath our feet, practiced by countless legs moving tirelessly in the dark. The quiet drama lies not only in the scale, but in the persistence. Human civilizations rise and fall within millennia, but insect societies have thrived for tens of millions of years, perfecting traditions that continue to this day. Their architecture endures storms, droughts, and floods. Their agriculture sustains colonies across generations. Their cooperation allows them to dominate ecosystems. To call this instinct alone is to miss the deeper truth. These are inherited traditions, refined by trial and error, passed on not genetically, but through the continuity of collective behavior. The mound, the tunnel, the fungus garden are not accidents of biology, but legacies of culture, proto-civilizations that endure because they are remembered together. Imagine lying close to the ground, ear pressed against the soil, and hearing the faint vibrations of a colony at work. Beneath the surface, countless tunnels hum with movement, like arteries pulsing with blood. Ants carry fragments, tend to fungi, groom one another, defend the entrance, all within a system so intricate it resembles the bustling of a city. Each chamber has a purpose, each pathway a function. The air is regulated, the waste removed, the food stored. Civilization in this miniature is not metaphor, but reality, an organized society, cooperative, continuous, adaptive. Its monuments may be hidden from human eyes, but they shape landscapes as surely as our own cities. There is a haunting beauty in the way these insect builders alter the land. Termite mounds change soil composition, enriching it with nutrients that feed grasses and trees. Ant colonies aerate the earth, improving fertility, influencing plant growth. Their architecture does not only serve themselves, but reshapes ecosystems, supporting countless other species. In this, their role mirrors that of beavers, but at an even greater scale. Where beavers redirect water, insects rebuild soil. Both are keystone engineers. Both are culture bearers. Both are participants in the great tradition of civilization that spans species. And yet, their cultures are fragile too. Colonies can collapse from disease, predation, or environmental disruption. A mound abandoned becomes a ruin, eroded by rain, swallowed by vegetation. The memory of the colony vanishes with it, leaving behind only traces in the soil. These ruins, like the ruins of human cities, remind us that civilization is always temporary, always subject to forces beyond control. But they also remind us that disappearance does not erase existence. For as long as they lived, those colonies built, farmed, and cooperated. They carried traditions as real as any human archive, even if written in earth rather than stone. The question lingers: if termites and ants can sustain such complex traditions, what separates their civilizations from ours? Perhaps the difference lies in consciousness, in awareness of the whole. Perhaps it lies in the durability of records, in the ability to preserve memory beyond the life of the colony. But perhaps these distinctions are less important than the recognition that culture exists on a spectrum, that civilization is not an invention of one species, but a possibility of life itself. Insects remind us that architecture, agriculture, and cooperation are not uniquely human, but universal themes, appearing wherever life learns to remember together. As night deepens, the mounds stand like sentinels, their silhouettes dark against the stars. Within, the colony hums, tireless, unseen, continuing traditions older than our own. Civilization, in this quiet field, is written not in marble, but in mud, not in glass, but in fungus, not in laws, but in memory carried by countless legs. And as you drift toward rest, the thought unfolds gently. The earth itself may be full of hidden civilizations, whispering through soil and air, building not for glory, but for survival, not for monuments, but for continuity. In the cool of early morning, when the air is still and the sky pale with the first hints of light, the mounds of termites and the hidden cities of ants stand as if the night had not passed at all. Their silence is deceptive, for beneath the crust of soil and clay, life has not paused. Tunnels hum with activity, thousands upon thousands of bodies moving in coordination, so complete it feels almost like a single organism breathing. The colony is alive, a mind made of many, carrying forward traditions refined through ages. 2. Think of this as to realize that civilization need not be visible to be real. It can be buried, humming in the earth, unseen yet enduring. Leafcutter ants, in particular, reveal the depth of this continuity. For millions of years, they have practiced a form of agriculture astonishing in its sophistication. Each ant cuts fragments of leaves, carrying them along highways of living bodies back to the nest. There, in chambers deep underground, the leaves are chewed into mulch and seeded with fungal spores. The fungi grow, nurtured in stable conditions of temperature and humidity, tended like crops in fields. Waste is removed to specialized dumps, new material is added carefully, and the harvest sustains the colony. This is not instinctual gathering, but cultivation, a tradition so old and so precise that it rivals the beginnings of human farming. Their fungus is their wheat, their corn, their rice, and it has been so for tens of millions of years. They are farmers hidden in the earth, their gardens unseen yet vital, their memory stored not in tools or texts, but in behavior repeated endlessly. Termites, too, have their own form of agriculture, cultivating fungi within their mounds, ensuring that the conditions remain favorable through constant adjustment. The mound itself becomes a farm, a climate-controlled chamber where generations feed and thrive. These practices are not new experiments. They are lineages of knowledge older than our species, sustained through cycles of life and death, remembered by the colony as a whole. If we call our own agricultural beginnings the dawn of civilization, then what are these insect farms but parallel dawns, ancient and ongoing? There is something deeply moving in realizing that the impulse to cultivate, to construct, to cooperate is not confined to humanity. It is written into the fabric of life, emerging again and again in different forms, shaped by circumstance but united in principle. Insects demonstrate this with relentless clarity. They show us that civilization does not require consciousness of history, only continuity of tradition. It does not require monuments of stone, only structures that persist. It does not require language in our sense, only communication sufficient to coordinate and remember. Their societies remind us that the essential ingredients of civilization, knowledge, cooperation, architecture, and inheritance, are not uniquely ours but shared. As the sun climbs, shadows shorten, and the heat presses down, the termite mound becomes a fortress of cool air. Within, the colony moves in darkness, but every action is purposeful. Ants repair tunnels, carry food, tend larvae. Termites adjust the flow of air through their chambers, guided by cues invisible to us, but precise, enough to maintain equilibrium. It is easy to see these behaviors as mechanical, but to watch closely is to sense a rhythm, a repetition that feels like ritual. Day after day, night after night, they continue. Not because they must as individuals, but because the colony remembers. Each generation inherits not only genes, but practices, not only survival, but tradition. And this inheritance is what civilization has always been, the passing of memory beyond the lifespan of the individual. When researchers pour plaster into abandoned colonies, the casts reveal labyrinths of astonishing scale. Chambers spiral downward, tunnels weave and intersect, shafts rise like chimneys. To walk through such a cast would be to walk through a city of another kind, one designed not for humans, but for the needs of countless small lives. The discovery is humbling. Our cities of steel and glass feel less unique when compared to these architectures of soil and saliva, equally complex, equally purposeful, equally enduring. Civilization here is not metaphor, but parallel, another expression of the same possibility. The fragility of these insect civilizations is part of their poignancy. Colonies can collapse suddenly, undone by drought, disease, or intrusion. And abandoned, mound erodes into the earth, tunnels collapse, gardens decay. Within a season, what was once a thriving culture becomes indistinguishable from the landscape. Yet for the years it lived, it was real. A civilization complete in its own moment, no less valid for its impermanence. This fragility mirrors our own histories, where cities fall, languages vanish, and monuments crumble. It reminds us that continuity is always provisional, always dependent on the care of those who inherit it. Civilization is never guaranteed. It is sustained only by attention, whether in the hands of insects or humans. At dusk, when the heat relents, the air fills again with movement. Ants stream outward in lines, carrying fragments of leaves larger than themselves, green banners swaying. In the fading light, termites surface briefly, repairing, adjusting, reinforcing their towers. The earth vibrates with their labor, invisible to most eyes, yet monumental in its consequences. Their work reshapes ecosystems, alters soil chemistry, sustains forests. They are hidden, yes, but they are architects nonetheless, builders of a world that would collapse without their traditions. To lie here and imagine it is to see civilization not as a human invention, but as a principle alive in the smallest of lives. And as night falls once more, the mounds stand against the sky like monuments, their silhouettes strange and silent. Inside, life continues, rituals repeat, memory endures. Civilization here is not written in books but in bodies, not preserved in libraries but in chambers of earth. Yet it is civilization all the same, a culture carried forward, a tradition remembered together. The insects whisper through their endless labor that we are not alone in building, not unique in cultivating, not singular in remembering. They remind us that the world is already full of civilizations, some vast, some hidden, some fleeting, all part of a larger story of life's impulse, to shape, to share, to endure. And so, as you drift deeper into the quiet of this thought, the hum of insects becomes a lullaby, steady and unbroken. Their cities rise beneath your imagination. Their farms flourish unseen. Their tunnels stretch into the dark. Civilization, in this moment, feels less like an achievement of one species and more like a current that runs through all life, manifesting wherever cooperation and memory meet. Tomorrow the insects will continue, as they have for millions of years, tending their traditions, expanding their worlds, writing their histories in earth and air. And we, if we listen carefully, may hear in their hum the same truth that has carried us, that to build, to remember, to pass on, is to live as part of civilization's long and endless chorus. The mounds fade into darkness. The hum of insects quiets with the cooling air, and yet the thought they leave behind continues to resonate. For in their lives, we see the pattern of all civilizations: emergence, flourishing, persistence, and eventually, disappearance. The termites, the ants, the beavers, the whales, the birds, the primates, all create, all preserve, all endure for a time, but none escape the slow unraveling of memory, the erosion of structure, the silence that follows when traditions are broken. Civilization, it seems, is less a permanent state and more a fragile balance, an experiment tested endlessly by the passage of time.